Chapter 2054. Zhang Feng glanced at Chingchimo. If there were not so many people, he would have gone up and kicked this guy. Why did this guy think of a good exercise as such a dirty thing? And it was not just this guy. Zhang Suncheng and Du Go were also looking at him with lewd smiles. This made him feel disgusted. He hurriedly explained, "This is just a kind of exercise. Can you not think so dirty?" "No need to explain, no need to explain." Chingchimo patted Zhang Feng's shoulder and smiled. "We all understand, you don't have to explain." "That's right, Fengzi. You don't have to explain, we are all men." Du Go chuckled and showed his yellow teeth. Zhang Feng rolled his eyes at the three of them. He originally didn't want to explain, but these three guys insisted on thinking in that direction. He had no choice but to explain. In the end, when he tried to explain, these three guys didn't want to listen. They made it seem like he was hiding something. He simply crossed his arms and didn't say anything. "Right, Fengzi, are all your guards so strong? They don't even wear clothes in such cold weather?" Du Go pointed at the guards on the ground and said with a face full of surprise. Zhang Feng originally did not want to answer such an idiotic question, but seeing these people's thirst for knowledge, he could only say, "Guanzhong looks cold, but it is only cold in the morning and at night. It is not especially cold at noon. Also, they are exercising, and their bodies are sweating. How can they be cold?" Hearing this, Chingchimo could not help it. Exercising could be so hot. They were sweating? He did not doubt Zhang Feng's words because he saw with his own eyes that these guards were topless, their bodies still giving off heat and large beads of sweat rolling down. If he also exercised, then wouldn't he not be afraid of the cold? And it could strengthen his body. Perhaps there would be some unexpected gains. Otherwise, why would these people be in such strange positions? Thinking this, he looked at the guards on the ground, and then looked at Zhang Feng. He smiled and said, "Fengzi, can you let me try?" Me too, me too." Zhang Sun raised his hand high, as if he was afraid of missing himself. Zhang Feng was speechless. These three guys seemed to feel that this push-up was a beneficial exercise, and it was a beneficial exercise in that aspect. Since they wanted to try it, he couldn't stop them. He waved his hand and said, "If you want to try it, go ahead." As he spoke, he turned to look at Du Go with a look of disdain. "Do you want to try as well?" Why did he ask Du Go? Because when Zhang Feng was speaking earlier, he had seen Du Go's fiery gaze from the corner of his eyes. Most likely, he had long wanted to go. Sure enough, as soon as Zhang Feng's voice fell, Du Go ran even faster than Chingchimo, choosing a spot in advance to lie down. "Debing, how the F***ck are you so fast?" Chingchimo cursed angrily, and then found a place to lie down. Zhang Sun naturally didn't want to be left behind. He stuck close to Chingchimo and lay down. Zhang Feng glanced at the three of them and shouted, "Get ready to start. 1-2, 1-2, 1. Chingchimo and the others listened to the chant while mimicking the positions of the guards beside them, and began the aerobic exercise. In the beginning, these guys were doing very well. It was considered standard practice. However, as they continued, they felt that something was wrong. "Fengzi, my arm hurts a little. I feel like my whole body is going to fall apart. My arm hurts so much." Chingchimo and the others' faces were red as they shouted in pain. Looking at the three of them, Zhang Feng couldn't bear it. In fact, he didn't want the three of them to do push-ups. After all, people who hadn't done this exercise before would definitely feel uncomfortable doing it for the first time. Some might even sprain their arms easily. These were all common occurrences. Furthermore, these three guys didn't exercise normally. How could they withstand it? However, before he could say anything, these fellows had already gone down. So what if they went down? They had only done a few and they couldn't hold on anymore. Looking at the guards, then looking at these fellows, Zhang Feng really wanted to spit on them. Thinking about it, these guys still wanted to make the steam engine for him. He could only say, "If you can't do it, then get up. I'm not forcing you." Chingchimo nodded with difficulty. Just as he was about to get up, his arm felt like it was hit by something. His arm went limp and his face fell to the ground. "Iron Bull." Zhang Feng strode forward and quickly helped Chingchimo up. He asked with concern, "Iron Bull, what happened to you?" Chingchimo sucked in a breath of cold air. His left hand held his right hand tightly. He gritted his teeth and said, "My arm hurts." "Your arm hurts?" Zhang Feng gently pinched Ching Chimo's arm and asked, "Does it hurt here? How do you feel?" "Iron Bull, how do you feel?" Zhang Sunchong and the other two also came over and asked nervously. When they heard Ching Chimo scream just now, the two of them didn't dare to continue. They were afraid that something would go wrong. Ching Chimo was still gritting his teeth. However, the pain seemed to have lessened a lot this time. He said cautiously, "It doesn't hurt as much as before." Chapter 2055. Zhang Feng frowned and glanced at Zhang Sunchong. "Bug, go and find a doctor." Zhang Sunchong nodded, and was about to leave when a big man came and held him down. Then he looked at Zhang Feng. "Master, Chen Xiaoya's hand is fine. I can see it." The person who spoke was He Quan. He had seen everything clearly. Although he knew what was wrong with Ching Chimo, he did not go forward because he was just guessing. Now that he saw Ching Chimo's arm, he was sure that there was a problem. Zhang Feng glanced at He Quan and asked with a serious face, "You can read it? Are you a doctor?" Although Tai Nyo was not a good person, he was still his brother. He could not give his hand to others. Even if the person was a guard in the mansion, it was not a problem to ask for details. He Quan seemed to know what the master was thinking and smiled awkwardly. "Master, I am not a doctor, but I know that Chen Xiaoya's hand was just twisted. There is no need to find a doctor. Maybe we can find a doctor who is not good at medicine. Chen Xiaoya's hand will be ruined." "Ah." Cheng Chimo's face changed, and he pulled He Quan with his left hand. He said excitedly, "Take a look at my hand." Zhang Feng let go of his hand suspiciously. He remembered that this guy did not know any medicine. How could he be so good at it? But it was not the time to think about it. It was more important to let He Quan treat Ching Chimo's hand. He Quan took Ching Chimo and rubbed his hand. Then he suddenly pulled. Ching Chimo screamed like a pig being slaughtered, and then he calmed down. "Master, it's done." He Quan shook Ching Chimo's hand, and then looked at Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng could not answer, and Zhang Sunchong asked with confusion, "That's it? That's it?" He Quan nodded and said, "Chen Xiaoya just twisted his hand. We just need to adjust his bones. We often encountered such situations when we were doing push-ups, and we always used this method." Zhang Feng was suddenly enlightened. It turned out that this guy knew the truth through practice. Previously, when he was doing push-ups, he even twisted his wrist. How could he not know? Just as she was about to ask, Ching Chimo spoke, "My hand doesn't seem to hurt anymore." As he spoke, Ching Chimo even swung his hand. His face was filled with joy. However, this guy's strength was a little too strong. Perhaps it was because of the tug, but it made a pig's cry. "Are you all right?" Zhang Feng looked at Ching Chimo with concern. "It should be fine now." Ching Chimo rubbed his arm and looked at He Quan. "Thank you." He Quan chuckled. "No need to thank me. This is what I should do." With that, he turned around and prepared to leave. Zhang Feng hurriedly said, "Wait." He Quan turned around and looked at Zhang Feng. He said respectfully, "Master, what else can I do for you?" Zhang Feng glanced at He Quan and said with appreciation, "I didn't know you twisted your hand before. Go to the accountant and get some money as compensation." He Quan didn't reply, but the guards behind him couldn't suppress the joy in their hearts. One by one, they jumped high and shouted that their master was wise. In their opinion, their master was already magnanimous by doing this training. Now he was even giving them money. This was simply a saintly figure. Zhang Feng, on the other hand, did not think much of it. He was originally from the later generations and did not have such a strong division of social classes. He only said indifferently, "Everyone, don't be happy. This is just a simple reward. Continue training." After that, he looked at Ching Chimo and smiled. "I just told you to be careful. Are you okay now? Your hand is still like this." Ching Chimo had always had a fearless temperament, so he naturally didn't care about the injury on his hand. He smiled and said, "This injury is nothing. Let's go eat hot pot." With that, he put his left hand on Zhang Suan's shoulder and looked indifferent. Zhang Feng shook his head. He wanted to say something, but when he saw this guy's appearance, he stopped. The group of people came to the hall. The fragrance of the hot pot was already floating in the air. A group of servants was busy in the hall. Master, the hot pot and wine are ready. Du Ziding bowed to Zhang Feng. Before Zhang Feng could reply, Cheng Chimo was already sitting around the table. He picked up a pair of chopsticks with his left hand and put food into the pot. However, this guy was right-handed and his right hand was injured. His left hand did not seem to listen to him. He picked up the food and ran away. It was very funny. Zhang Sun smiled and strode forward. Tainyo, you're destined to not eat hot pot. Watch Lao Tzu. With that, he picked up a plate of beef and put it into the pot. Cheng Chimo naturally did not want to be outdone. He glared at Zhang Sun and poured the food into the pot with his left hand. Looking at these guys, Zhang Feng was speechless. He wanted to leave quickly and meet up with these guys. In the end, these guys started fighting among themselves. He walked to the table with a face full of anger. Can you guys stop for a while? This is hot pot, not a fight. Chapter 2056. The addition of Zhang Feng calmed these guys down a little. Cheng Chimo picked up a jar of wine, gritted his teeth, looked at Zhang Feng, and said with a smile, Fengzi, come and drink. Yes, 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 drink. Du Go also picked up a bottle of wine and looked at Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng naturally fell behind and bumped into everyone. After drinking a glass of wine, Cheng Chimo's face instantly turned red. He looked at Zhang Feng and said with a smile, Fengzi, what are your plans for this trip to Jiangnan? Tell us and see what we can help you with. He was not bragging. As the son of a duke, he was going to inherit the title of duke in the future. Although his title might be lowered, the Cheng family had some influence in Chang, and in even the entire Tang dynasty. Therefore, it was not a problem to provide some help. Zhang Feng took out a cigarette from his waist. He knew Cheng Chimo's intention. He smiled and said, this trip to Jiangnan is nothing more than to develop perfume and silk. Although Cheng Chimo had good intentions, he could not say too much. Some words could only be said to people like his teacher. Otherwise, with Cheng Chimo's temper, he might spread it everywhere. Cheng Chimo did not know Zhang Feng's thoughts, but when he heard this, his face was slightly embarrassed. Fengzi, if you say something else, I might be able to help you. But this perfume, I've only heard about it from you. I can't help you at all. Silk may not work either. This thing is too precious, and most of it is in the hands of the clans. In fact, Zhang Feng already knew. After all, perfume had not been developed yet, and it was a modern product. Some people had not even heard of it, let alone know about it. Therefore, he did not blame Cheng Chimo. Instead, he smiled and said, it's okay. Let's drink. Fengzi, although we don't know about perfume, I think I've heard you mention it before. Why don't we? Cheng Chimo winked at Zhang Sun and the other two, then looked at Zhang Feng and said with a smile, why don't you tell us what this thing is today? Zhang Sun naturally understood Cheng Chimo's wink, and he was also interested in perfume. He smiled and said, yes, Fengzi, let us also broaden our horizons. Tell us what perfume is. Zhang Feng originally didn't want to talk about the perfume, but thinking that the perfume might be sold all over the country in the future, and these guys might also help, he might as well explain it to them. So he said, okay, I'll tell you guys today. As he spoke, he took a deep breath and said with a smile, perfume is a kind of water with a smell. It's mainly made of flowers. The three of them were a little confused, but thinking that this was a novel thing, they still braced themselves and listened. Zhang Feng also explained to the three of them with a serious face. No matter what the three of them asked, he would try his best to answer. After all, these three guys might be his greatest assistants in the future. They went to study the perfume, but the hot pot in the pot was still boiling, emitting a strong fragrance. The fragrance continued to spread throughout the entire residence. Naturally, it also included the backyard where the two women lived. Zhang Yuyao smelled the fragrance that gradually came in and frowned. She turned to look at the maidservant Xiao Cui and asked, Xiao Cui, who is eating hot pot in the residence? Why is there such a strong smell? She had eaten hot pot with Zhang Feng before, so she naturally knew what this smell was. Xiao Cui naturally also knew. She glanced at the door, then looked at Zhang Yuyao and said with a smile, Miss, it's your husband. You wretched girl. Zhang Yuyao rolled her eyes at Xiao Cui, but she was very happy in her heart. She liked people to call her Madame Zhang. or the mistress of the Zhang residence, because she felt that she was Zhang Feng's woman. However, Zhang Feng still did not marry her, which made her feel a little uncomfortable. Prince Zhang is not my husband yet. Xiao Chui smiled and went to Zhang Yuyao's side. Miss, if he is not now, then he will be in the future. Are you thinking about marriage? You naughty girl, saying these shameless words all day. Zhang Yuyao pinched Xiao Chui and said with a little sadness, but Prince Zhang is going to Jiangnan soon. Since Prince Zhang said that he was going to Jiangnan last time, there seemed to be a stone in her heart that she could not move away. In fact, she did not want Prince Zhang to go to Jiangnan. First of all, it was very dangerous to go to Jiangnan. There were many clans there, and those clans all regarded Prince Zhang as an enemy. If Prince Zhang went to Jiangnan, there would definitely be a conflict. At that time, it would be difficult to deal with it. After all, the clans were so powerful that even the imperial court had to retreat. Second of all, it was because of Yu Yu. Although she had accepted Yu Yu, she felt like there was a thorn in her heart when she thought that Prince Zhang was going to Jiangnan to find Yu Yu. This was the nature of a woman, or the selfish side of her. No one could avoid it. But she also knew that she could not persuade Prince Zhang, so she could only go to Jiangnan with Prince Zhang. Chapter 2057. However, she had a new worry, which was her reputation. She was an unmarried woman. Although she had some status with Prince Zhang now, she was still unmarried. It would not be good for an unmarried woman to travel with a man. However, she was worried about Prince Zhang, which made her very confused. Should she go to Jiangnan with Prince Zhang or not? If she didn't go, what if Prince Zhang was in danger in Jiangnan? Moreover, Yu Yu was there. If she went, what about the Zhang family's reputation? As Zhang Yuyao's personal maid, Xiao Chui naturally understood her thoughts. She patted Zhang Yuyao's shoulder and whispered, Miss, are you still thinking about going to Jiangnan? Zhang Yuyao looked up at Xiao Chui, but she didn't say anything. She just nodded gently. Xiao Chui pursed her lips. She didn't want to talk about this with her miss, but when she saw her confused face, she couldn't help but say, Miss, I don't know whether I should say it or not, but I think you should go with Prince Zhang. Please don't blame me. Although she often joked with Zhang Yuyao, she didn't dare to talk nonsense about this matter. Zhang Yuyao slowly raised her head and looked at Xiao Chui with some doubts. Why do you say that? Xiao Chui pulled the corner of her clothes and said with some uncertainty, Miss, I don't know, but I think Prince Zhang is so good and rich. Now he is going to Jiangnan to develop his business. He may settle down in Jiangnan in the future. If you don't seize the opportunity now, it will be too late in the future. Moreover, now the people in Quanan know about your relationship with Prince Zhang. If you don't go now, how can you establish yourself in Chang'an, and in the future? She was speaking her mind. In fact, this was also true. Zhang Yuyao and Zhang Feng's relationship was like an unmarried couple, and the people in Quanan knew about it. If Zhang Yuyao didn't go to Jiangnan, it wouldn't have any impact. However, if Zhang Feng didn't come back for a long time, what would Zhang Yuyao do? Was she going to remarry? He probably wouldn't even dare to accept her if she remarried, because it was a taboo for women to remarry in this era. Moreover, he might not even dare to accept Zhang Feng's woman. Of course, this was all in the future. Zhang Yuyao's heart was in a mess. She grabbed Xiao Chui and said nervously, Xiao Chui, I know what you're saying, but if I go, people will inevitably criticize my family. I want to go, but I'm worried about my parents. Indeed, when an unmarried woman followed a man to a faraway place, it was easy for people to think of some ambiguous scenes. These scenes would naturally involve the family. Xiao Chui also knew this deeply. She said with some hesitation, Miss, if we don't go, what if Prince Zhang is in danger? Besides, Yu Yu is in Jiangnan. I heard that there are many beautiful women in Jiangnan. What if Prince Zhang is bewitched by women? At that time, you won't even have a place to cry. This was also the truth. Jiangnan had always been a place filled with beautiful women and talents. Although Xiao Chui was just guessing, what if it was true? She was doing this for the sake of Mississippi. Zhang Yuyao nodded. She also knew what Xiao Chui was thinking, but she was hesitant about whether to go to Jiangnan or not. Suddenly, she seemed to think of something and quickly said, Xiao Chui, What do you think about discussing it with father? This was the only way she could think of now. Since ancient times, when children went out, they would go home to say goodbye to their parents. She was no exception. It was a good opportunity to discuss it with her father. Xiao Chui nodded. Miss, you're right. We should discuss it with master. Maybe he has a way to satisfy both sides. But it should be done as soon as possible. Otherwise, it won't be good if it's late. Zhang Yuyao nodded slightly and quickly said, Xiao Chui, go back and tell father about the situation first. At the same time, you can also sound him out. Xiao Chui nodded and turned to leave. At the same time, in the imperial study of the palace, Li Shimin sat on the dragon throne with a cigarette in his hand. The smoke filled the entire room, making him look mysterious and serious. My dear ministers, I plan to reveal my identity to Fengzi. What do you think? When he said this, Wei Zheng and the other ministers frowned. They actually did not agree with Li Shimin revealing his cards. This was because they understood Zhang Feng's personality and talent. Normally, such an expert would not easily become an official. Of course, they did not know what Zhang Feng was thinking. But to reveal his cards just for the sake of revealing his cards, it was undoubtedly not worth it. What if Zhang Feng was that kind of expert, and once Li Shimin revealed his cards, Zhang Feng would leave? Wouldn't this be the biggest loss to the Tang dynasty? They could not afford to lose such a huge gamble. Thus, Wei Zheng stood up and said with a serious face, Your Majesty, I feel that now is not the time. Old Fartway, what do you mean? Chapter 2058. Cheng Yaojin jumped out and stared at Wei Zheng with dissatisfaction. Jijie, don't speak. Li Shimin waved his hand and motioned for Cheng Yaojin to leave. When the latter saw that His Majesty had spoken, he had to leave with an indignant expression. Li Shimin turned to look at Wei Zheng and said solemnly, Minister Wei, continue. Yes, Your Majesty. Wei Zheng cupped his hands and said, Your Majesty, we have been hiding this fact from Zhang Feng. This is undoubtedly a lie. If you suddenly tell him that you are the emperor now, he will definitely not be able to accept it. Besides, what if he is unhappy and runs away? Li Shimin nodded slightly. He had not thought about this. He just wanted to lay his cards on the table with Zhang Feng, because Zhang Feng was about to go to Jiangnan. There were many clans in Jiangnan, so it must be very dangerous. At first, he wanted to persuade Zhang Feng to stay. After all, Chang'an was his nest. What could he not have? It was not certain if he went to Jiangnan. There were so many clans. If he was not careful, he might be buried in the tiger's mouth. However, this guy did not listen to his advice. He was bent on going to Jiangnan. There was no other way. Li Shimin could only plan to lay his cards on the table with Zhang Feng. There were 3 advantages to doing so. First, he could tell Zhang Feng that he was the emperor and that he could protect him. Second, he could also warn the 5 clans and 7 kings that Zhang Feng was his man, and no one could touch him. Third, according to Zhang Feng's past achievements, he could casually give some rewards to Zhang Feng. In this way, his safety would be increased a lot. However, Wei Zheng's words made him reconsider. However, at this moment, Cheng Yaojin jumped out and said with a face full of indignation, Your Majesty, I have decided to lay my cards on the table. Now that Fengzi is about to go to Jiangnan, as long as we lay our cards on the table, it will definitely be a protective umbrella. Those clans in Jiangnan will definitely not dare to touch Fengzi. Li Shimin nodded slightly. It had to be said that Cheng Yaojin and he had the same idea. As long as they laid their cards on the table, the clan would not dare to touch Fengzi. However, if they laid their cards on the table, what if they agreed with Wei Zheng? With that thought in mind, he swept his gaze across the crowd. Does anyone else have any objections? Zhang Sun Wuji turned his head and glanced at the crowd. Seeing that no one spoke, he took a step forward, cupped his hands and said, Your Majesty, Zhang Feng's character is jumpy, he is not suitable to be an official. Besides, he doesn't seem to have the intention to be an official. If we lay our cards on the table with him now, it will inevitably arouse his vigilance. Moreover, if we lay our cards on the table, will there be anyone who can talk to you so intimately? These words were like a clap of thunder that exploded in Li Shimin's mind. If he laid his cards on the table, would there be anyone who could talk to him so intimately? Indeed, although he was the emperor, no one dared to talk to him so intimately like Fengzi in front of him. Even the ministers who met him every day were afraid of him like a tiger. The only person who could talk to him intimately was Maid Guanyin. However, they were only husband and wife, unlike Zhang Feng. He vaguely remembered the scene in Zhang Feng's tavern. At that time, Zhang Feng did not know his identity. He really treated him as a friend. They even chatted about the Xuanwu Gate incident together. If he laid his cards on the table, perhaps he would not dare to say these words, right? Yes, when he was not the emperor, there were many relatives and friends around him. Everyone present was his confidant. However, once he became the emperor, these people seemed to have changed. They became very afraid of him. They even began to speak carefully, and did not dare to reveal their true feelings. Even the imperial uncle, Zhang Sunwuji, was the same. At that time he and Zhang Sunwuji were friends. Now even when he spoke to him, he was careful. What if Fengzi also became like this? While he was thinking, Qing Yaojin spoke again. Your Majesty, they are talking nonsense. Don't listen to them. Fengzi's safety is the most important thing. If this guy goes to Jiangnan and is remembered by the clans, we are all in Chang'an. There is no way to save Fengzi. At that time, you will regret it. Qing Yaojin's words were not without reason. Chang'an and Jiangnan were very far away. It would take at least 10 days to travel. If Zhang Feng was in danger in Jiangnan, they would be in Chang'an and would not be able to rescue him. Qing Yaojin, don't disturb His Majesty's thoughts. Feng Xianling glared at Qing Yaojin. Then he stepped forward and said, Your Majesty, even if there is danger in Jiangnan, you can send troops to protect Zhang Feng. However, you must not lay your cards on the table with Zhang Feng. Li Shimin took a deep drag of his cigarette. With a puzzled expression he asked, Minister Feng, why is that? Feng Xianling cupped his hands and said solemnly, Your Majesty, you appeared on the streets of Chang'an in plain clothes before. Many people know you. If you lay your cards on the table with Zhang Feng, it will undoubtedly cause a great disturbance in Chang'an. Also, as Wei Jing said, Zhang Feng's personality is lively. He is not suitable to be an official. Even if you give him an official position now, he may not be willing. Chapter 2059. At that time, Li Shimin didn't think so far ahead. When he heard what everyone said, he instantly felt that it made sense. Moreover, just like what Zhang Sunwuji said earlier, if he were to lay his cards on the table, then Zhang Feng wouldn't be so close to him, and might even distance himself. After thinking for a while he said, Everyone is right. Let's put this matter aside for now. Qing Yaojin was unwilling. He hurriedly said, Your Majesty, what if Fengzi is in danger in Jiangnan? Let's lay all our cards on the table. Fengzi will have guards to protect him in Jiangnan. Furthermore, how can Your Majesty stand by and do nothing? Feng Xianling waved his sleeves and looked at Qing Yaojin unhappily. In his eyes, Qing Yaojin was the kind of person who stirred up **T. He would stir things up whenever something happened. It was originally a small matter, but once he stirred things up, it could not be resolved. Li Shimin naturally did not want to see the imperial study become a place for these people to quarrel. He hurriedly scolded, All right, stop quarreling. I have my own plans. Then he looked at Wei Zheng. Minister Wei, I heard that White Deer College is preparing for the year-end examination. Wei Zheng nodded. Your Majesty, White Deer College is indeed preparing for the year-end examination. Now Mr. Bo Shi is leading the students to prepare. Li Shimin nodded slightly and said with a serious face, Prepare some things then. My ministers will go with me. Your Majesty, should we send the imperial court officials to attend the ceremony? Zhang Sunwuji stepped forward and asked respectfully. Li Shimin was silent. Originally, he did not plan to send the officials of the imperial court to attend the ceremony. However, after thinking about it, even if he did not say anything, these fellows would probably attend the ceremony. It would be better to send the members of the imperial family. After thinking about it, he said, Then send Li Xiaogong. He previously appeared as a member of the imperial family. There should be no problem. Previously, Li Xiaogong had met Zhang Feng as a member of the royal family, as well as many students of the academy. This time, There should be no problem for him to attend the academy meeting. Zhang Sun Wuji nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. Li Shimin nodded slightly and stood up slowly. It's been a long time since I've seen Fengzi. Let's go out and see how she's doing. As he spoke, he walked down the hall with a majestic gait. Everyone followed closely behind him. Little Gizi took the lead and went to arrange a carriage in advance. Li Shimin and the others boarded the carriage and headed towards the Zhang mansion. They didn't speak a word along the way and soon arrived at the Zhang mansion. Li Shimin led the group into the Zhang mansion. As soon as they entered, they heard a series of shouts. What's that sound? Li Shimin turned his head and glanced at the crowd, asking curiously. Wei Zheng and the others all shook their heads in confusion. They had never heard such a sound, so they naturally didn't know. However, Cheng Yaojin's ears perked up as if he had heard something. He said excitedly, Your Majesty, this is the sound of military training. Huh? Li Shimin turned to Cheng Yaojin and asked in confusion. You mean this is the sound of military training? As he spoke, he seemed to have remembered something. He seemed to have roared like this when he led the troops. However, this sound seemed to be a little special. It was even shouting numbers such as 12121 and so on. It seemed that he had never heard of it before. He had to ask again. This seems to be the sound of military training, but it seems to be a little different from the other military camps. Cheng Yaojin naturally felt it too. He nodded and said, Yes, it's a little different from the other military camps. It's even shouting numbers, which I've never heard before. Let's go and have a look. With a wave of his hand, Li Shimin turned around and walked towards the source of the voice. After a while, the group arrived at the front yard. What they saw was a group of men lying on the ground, as if they were doing some kind of exercise. Li Shimin was a little confused. He went forward and asked, What are you doing? He Quan saw that they looked familiar, and guessed that they were guests of the residence. He quickly got up and replied, We're training. Training? Li Shimin turned to Cheng Yaojin and asked in confusion, Old Cheng, have you heard of this kind of training? Cheng Yaojin shook his head in confusion. Although he came from the military camp, he had never seen such a strange training. He was about to say no when He Quan came up to Cheng Yaojin. He cupped his hands respectfully and said, So it's Master Cheng. He Quan also came from the military camp, so he naturally knew Cheng Yaojin. However, after he retired from the military, he was assigned to the Zhang residence to protect Zhang Feng. He naturally knew their identities, so he called Cheng Yaojin Master Cheng. Cheng Yaojin saw that this guy knew him and smiled. What were you training just now? He Quan naturally didn't dare to hide it. He quickly said, This is a training method that Master invented for us to use for daily training. Fengzi? Li Shimin frowned slightly. He knew Zhang Feng very well. He wouldn't be so bored as to come up with something like this. Since he came up with it, it must be useful. He just didn't know what it was. He thought and asked, Fengzi, what's the use of this training method? Chapter 2060. He Quan's heart skipped a beat as he secretly guessed this person's identity. To be able to call Old Master Fengzi, he should not be a simple person. Moreover, to have Lu Guogong by his side, he did not seem to be an ordinary person. After thinking for a while, he replied, Old Master said that this training method is to strengthen our bodies. He said that it is more effective than the military camp. More effective than the military camp? Cheng Yaojin exclaimed and looked at He Quan in disbelief. He had been in the military camp since he was young and had experienced all kinds of training methods. He had even created some training methods himself. However, he had never heard of any training method that was better than the military camp's training method. This was because the military camp's training had always been the cruelest. Only soldiers could endure such training methods. However, today, someone actually said that this training method was better than the military camp's training method? He was a little unconvinced and glared at him. Are you kidding, Lao Tzu? How can there be a training method that is better than the military camp's training method? He Quan's face changed and he quickly said, Old Master Chun, how would I dare? This is what my old master said. After hearing this, Cheng Yaojin started to doubt himself. This was because he knew that Fengzi was not someone who would make up something out of nothing. Since he said it, There must be some basis. However, he still did not dare to believe that this training method was better than the military camp's training method. After thinking for a while, he waved his sleeves and said, "Lao Tzu, come and try." "Old Master Cheng, wait." He Quan grabbed Cheng Yaojin and quickly said, "If you do this push-up for the first time, it is easy to twist your hand. Why don't you do it first?" And Cheng Yaojin turned his head and glanced at He Quan. He said with disdain, "Lao Tzu has such a strong body. Why would he be afraid of twisting his hand?" After saying that, he pushed He Quan away and lay down on the ground, imitating the other guards and starting to move. Li Shimin crossed his arms and looked at Cheng Yaojin playfully. In fact, he also wanted to see what kind of training method Feng Zi had created. Otherwise, he would have stopped Cheng Yaojin just now. Wei Zheng and the others behind him had a look of disdain on their faces. They were just short of saying that it was a disgrace to the cultured, because in their eyes, this action was really too unsightly. With both hands on the ground, and continuously crawling, what kind of behavior was this? But in the eyes of the guards, this was a treasure. The most important thing was the training method created by the old master. No matter what, they had to complete it. At this moment, they were all attracted by Cheng Yaojin. This was because Cheng Yaojin had already done more than a dozen, and he didn't even pant. Thinking back, when they first did it, they were all panting like cows. Now that Lu Guogong was doing it, why did he feel so relaxed? If it weren't for the fact that there were so many of them, they would have shouted, "The High Duke is awesome!" Of course, Cheng Yaojin couldn't hear these words. This was because he was currently immersed in the admiring gazes of the crowd. While he was doing it, he glanced at the surrounding guards. "Look carefully. Lao Tzu can do it with one hand." Cheng Yaojin glanced at the crowd with a proud face. Then he directly let go of one hand and started to exercise with his right hand. But the moment he let go, he suddenly felt powerless in his hand. His face fell to the ground with a bang. "Old Cheng, are you okay?" Li Shimin quickly went forward and supported Cheng Yaojin. "Old Cheng, are you okay?" Cheng Yaojin ate a mouthful of mud. Fortunately, Li Shimin helped him up. Otherwise, his nose would have been full of mud. He replied with a stiff face, my hand hurts." Li Shimin quickly turned Cheng Yaojin over. This guy was really too heavy. He used all his strength to turn Cheng Yaojin over. Then he was half lying on the ground. He quickly asked, "Which hand hurts?" Cheng Yaojin raised his trembling right hand and grimaced. "This hand hurts." As soon as he finished speaking, He Quan quickly went forward. "Let me do it." As he spoke, he reached out and rubbed Cheng Yaojin's hand. Then he shook it. Cheng Yaojin let out a pig's cry. "How is it?" Li Shimin looked at He Quan nervously. "It should be fine now." He Quan gently put Cheng Yaojin's hand back. "Old Cheng, how's your hand?" Li Shimin turned to look at Cheng Yaojin and asked with concern. Cheng Yaojin thought that his hand was going to break. When he heard this, he quickly raised his hand. In the end, he found that it didn't hurt as much as before. He said in surprise, "My hand is fine." With that, he stood up abruptly. However, because he used too much strength, his hand hurt again. He wailed, "Ouch, my hand. Who told you to be brave just now?" Li Shimin glared at Cheng Yaojin, then looked at He Quan. "How did you know his hand would be like this? How did you heal it?" He Quan glanced at Cheng Yaojin and said with a smile, "When we were doing push-ups just now, we all twisted our hands. Just now there was another person who twisted his hand too. I think his surname is also Cheng Yaojin. I healed him too." Hearing this, Cheng Yaojin's face was a little embarrassed. After all this time, there was another unlucky person just now. Moreover, this unlucky person had the same surname as him. Chapter 2061. He instantly felt that he couldn't stay here any longer. He hurriedly urged, let's go find Feng Zi." As soon as he said that, footsteps came from not far away. Not long after, Du Ziting walked over. "So it's Master Li. I thought it was screaming here." He had heard a series of miserable howls coming from here, so he ran over to take a look. Li Shimin saw Du Ziting and smiled. "Housekeeper, where's Feng Zi?" Du Ziting cupped his hands and smiled. "Master is eating hot pot with young Master Cheng and the others in the hall." Young Master Cheng? Cheng Yaojin was slightly stunned. Could it be Tainyo, that kid? Just now, the guard said that someone with the surname Cheng also twisted his hand. Could it be this kid? He hurriedly said, "Housekeeper, take us to see him." Du Ziting nodded and turned to walk to the hall. Li Shimin and Cheng Yaojin followed closely behind. Before they reached the hall, they smelled the rich smell of hot pot. This instantly aroused Cheng Yaojin's appetite. He didn't care about what happened just now and strode to the hall. As soon as he entered, he saw Ching Chimo holding chopsticks in his left hand and trying to pick something in the hot pot. He tried for a long time but couldn't get anything. It was a funny look. Cheng Yaojin's expression changed and he shouted, "Tainyo, why are you here?" This shout scared Ching Chimo so much that he almost fell off the stool. This was a fear that came from the depths of his bones. It was like the horn of the abyss, unforgettable. He sat on the stool and looked at his dead father with a bitter expression. His voice trembled. "Dad, why are you here?" Cheng Yaojin strode forward and picked Ching Chimo up like a chicken. But this time, he used his left hand. He said unhappily, "Lao Tzu was asking you. Why are you asking Lao Tzu now?" When Zhang Feng saw that the situation was not right, he quickly went forward and pulled Cheng Yaojin back. "Old Cheng, what are you doing? Why are you so angry the moment you arrive?" Ching Chimo knew that his father never knew the reason for his anger. Whenever he was unhappy, he would beat him up. Whenever he was happy, he would also beat him up. Therefore, he didn't dare to say anything. Cheng Yaojin glared at Zhang Feng and said, "This brat doesn't even know to call Lao Tzu when he's eating hot pot. He's eating alone? Don't you think he should be beaten? Also, did this kid sprain his hand when he was exercising in the front yard? You sprained your hand from just a little exercise. Don't you deserve a beating?" Zhang Feng suddenly understood. It turned out that Iron Bull was telling the truth when he said that old Ching didn't need a reason to beat him up. How could he be beaten up just because he was eating hot pot? And what kind of exercise was this? As he thought about it, he turned to look at Cheng Yaojin. Suddenly, he found that Cheng Yaojin's right hand was half-hanging. He was lifting Ching Chimo with his left hand. When he saw this, he instantly understood. Old Cheng had also gone to do push-ups and sprained his hand. He didn't know that someone had told Old Cheng that Ching Chimo's hand had also been sprained. Old Cheng was angry, so he came in to settle the score with Ching Chimo. However, even if he wanted to vent his anger, this wasn't the time. Zhang Feng quickly pulled Cheng Yaojin away and said with a serious expression, "Old Cheng, even if you sprained your hand, you can't blame Iron Bull, right? What's the use of venting your anger on him?" As soon as he said this, Cheng Chimo, who was still in a daze, understood something. It turned out that this damn father had also sprained his hand. No wonder he wanted to vent his anger on him. Although he mocked Cheng Yaojin in his heart, he didn't dare to say anything. He didn't even dare to laugh. However, Zhang Sunchong, who was next to the table, was overjoyed and burst into laughter. When Cheng Yaojin saw this, his eyes widened like a bull's. "You two bastards dare to laugh at Lao Tzu? Are you looking for a beating?" As he said this, he clenched his fist and was about to punch Zhang Sunchong and Cheng Chong. "Old Cheng, what are you trying to do?" A shout came from outside the door. Then Zhang Sunwuji, Li Shimin, and the others walked in. The person who spoke just now was Zhang Sunwuji. He was just about to enter the door when he saw Cheng Yaojin about to punch his son. How could he agree to this? Zhang Sunchong was the only bloodline of the Zhang Sun family. Normally, he was afraid that he would melt in his mouth and break in his hands. Zhang Sunwuji didn't even dare to hit him, so how could he let this fool hit him? Thinking of this, Zhang Sunwuji strode forward and stood in front of his son to protect him. He glared angrily at Cheng Yaojin. "What are you trying to do? How dare you hit my son? Is there no law in this world?" In fact, Cheng Yaojin didn't really want to hit Zhang Sunchong. After all, there was a generation gap between the two of them. It would be decent if he hit him. However, this guy just laughed at him, so he hit him. He just wanted to scare Zhang Sunchong, but he didn't expect that Zhang Sunwuji would stand up for him. He lost face and glared. "This brat just laughed at old man, don't you think he deserves to be hit?" Zhang Sunwuji looked at Cheng Yaojin's hand, and then looked at Ching Chimo's hand. Not only did his son want to laugh, but he also wanted to laugh at himself. However, there were too many people here, so he couldn't do anything. He could only say, "If you want to laugh at him, then so be it. Don't tell me you want to lower yourself to the same level as the younger generation." Chapter 2062. That's right. Old Cheng, calm down. Li Shimin walked up and pushed Qing Yaojin. With a helpless expression, he said, "Old Cheng, you're an adult. How can you lower yourself to the same level as a child? Even if he laughs at you, you won't do anything. Listen to me and let it go." Originally, Qing Yaojin wanted to argue with Zhang Sun Wuji, but seeing that Li Shimin had said so, he couldn't say anything. He could only pout and say unconcernedly, "Whatever you say." With that, he turned and found a stool to sit on. He picked up a wine cup and drank alone. Li Shimin looked helplessly at Qing Yaojin. He knew that this guy had a childish personality. Even though he was an official now, he still had a childish personality. He was a little angry now, but he would be fine later. Then he turned to look at Zhang Feng. "Fengzi, you rascal. What kind of training method did the yard make? Look, you've twisted old Cheng's hand." Originally, the matter had passed. With Li Shimin bringing it up, Qing Yaojin felt uncomfortable in his heart. Even Qing Chimo felt a little uncomfortable. He sat down with Qing Yaojin and the father and son drank to drown their sorrows. Zhang Feng ignored the lonely father and son. He turned to look at Li Shimin and smiled helplessly. "There's nothing I can do about it. I'm going to Jiangnan soon. I have to arrange for some people to protect me. It just so happens that there are some guards in the manor. I want to make use of these guards. As for the training methods, I've tailored them. As long as they follow the training methods every day, after a long time, their bodies will be healthier and stronger than ordinary people." Hearing this, Qing Yaojin was a little unwilling. He was someone who came from the military. How could he not know the training methods? He was familiar with almost all the training methods of the barracks. Although he had tried out Fengzi's training method and felt that it was a little powerful, how could it be compared to the training methods of the barracks? He suddenly stood up, turned his head to look at Zhang Feng, and said with a playful smile, "Fengzi, be careful that you don't bite your tongue when you talk big. I've tried out your training method just now." Speaking of this, his old face turned red. "Although I twisted my hand a little, I didn't feel any useful effects." Li Shimin looked at Zhang Feng with a puzzled expression. He had also seen the training method just now. Even someone like Qing Yaojin could do it. There was indeed nothing to be proud of. However, since Qing Yaojin had already raised doubts, there was no need for him to say anything more. Zhang Feng's face was full of disapproval. He smiled and said, "Old Cheng, you only did a few just now. If you do more, I guarantee that you won't even be able to lift your arms for a day. I'm not bragging. You also know that the guards in my courtyard are all veterans." In the first few days, these guys had difficulty eating, let alone lifting their arms. "You still underestimate my training method?" This was true. At that time, there were a few guys who couldn't even lift their hands after doing push-ups. They had to rely on others to feed them. In addition, they had to run in the morning. Their legs didn't seem to listen to them. Later, those guys had to lie in bed for a whole week before recovering. However, after recovering, these guys seemed to have changed into another person. Their spirits suddenly became much better than before. Even their usual running speed was much faster. Zhang Feng was very pleased about this because many people couldn't handle this kind of cruel training method. He himself also thought that this was an inhumane training method. However, if there wasn't such training, how could there be good soldiers? But fortunately, these guys had made it through. This was what made Zhang Feng the happiest. However, Qing Yaojin knew nothing about these things. He still put on an arrogant look and said, "Fengzi, don't brag. I just tried your training method. Although it's not bad, it doesn't meet the standards of the military camp at all, let alone surpass the training method of the military camp. If it's only like this, it really won't work." "Who told you that it's only at this level?" Zhang Feng glanced at Qing Yaojin and said with a disdainful look, "Let me tell you, my guards get up at 5 o'clock every day and run 5 laps around Chang'an City." "Get up at 5 o'clock? Run 5 laps around Chang'an City?" Qing Yaojin's mouth was wide open. He couldn't believe it. Even the soldiers in the military camp didn't get up so early. Run 5 laps around Chang'an City? 1 lap around Chang'an City was several kilometers. Then wouldn't 5 laps be more than 10 kilometers? He didn't even train like this in the past. After thinking about it, he only felt cold sweat running down his body. Li Shimin was the same. He was an emperor on horseback and had been in the military camp for a long time. However, he had never heard of such a training method, let alone used it. It sounded a little scary. Wei Zheng and the others standing behind him had already shivered. They were all civil officials. Usually, they didn't have any training at all, let alone participate in any training. Although they had heard of some training, they had never heard of such a powerful training method. Chapter 2063. They turned to look at Zhang Feng, only to see that Zhang Feng was still talking. After running, each of you will come back and do 500 push-ups, which is the exercise you saw just now. Then, you will continue to run in the yard. At dusk, you will go to the forge to practice firearms and archery. Li Shimin and the others' eyes widened, because they had never heard of such a cruel training method. Every morning, they would run 5 laps around Chang'an City, which was more than 10 kilometers. When they came back, they still had to run in the front yard and do push-ups. Needless to say, the push-ups alone were enough to make them suffer, not to mention that they still had to go to Shao Mountain to practice firearms and archery at dusk. Cheng Yaojin and Cheng Chimo had the most right to speak on this matter, because these 2 silly guys sprained their hands while doing push-ups. Now these 2 guys directly hid aside and drank without saying a word, because what happened just now had made them lose face. It was not appropriate for them to intervene now. However, Li Shimin could not sit still and hurriedly asked, "Fengzi, can they take it if you train those guys like this?" His words reminded Cheng Yaojin and his son, who were drinking alone. They put down the wine jugs in their hands and looked sideways. Even Wei Zheng and the others cast a puzzled look. However, Zhang Feng waved his hand carelessly and said, "Of course they can bear it. My training method is based on scientific evidence. Ahem, it has been experimented. Although they will be a little uncomfortable in the first few days, after 7 days, their physique will definitely have a qualitative leap, and their spirit will be much better than that of ordinary people, including physical skills. In short, as long as they train for a long time, their bodies will definitely be stronger than those who do not participate in the training. Of course, they have to supplement enough nutrition every day, such as eating more meat, so that the consumption of the body can be maintained." Cheng Yaojin quivered. Their physique would have a qualitative leap? Their spirit would be much better than that of ordinary people? He began to recall the people who did the push-ups just now. It seemed to be a little like that. The little guy who treated his injury just now looked strong and muscular, and his spirit seemed to be good. So Fengzi's training method was really effective? What if this training method was introduced into the military? Then, as he thought, he turned to look at Li Shimin, as if to ask for his opinion. Li Shimin naturally felt Cheng Yaojin's burning gaze. Their eyes met. In fact, he had also heard some clues just now. He even wanted to introduce this training method into the military camp. However, when he heard Fengzi say that the trainers had to provide a large amount of meat every day, his heart ached a little. Fengzi's family was big, and he didn't have many guards, so it wasn't a problem for him to provide meat. But the Tang dynasty had hundreds of thousands of soldiers. How the hell were they going to supply them? Every year, there was not enough rations for the army, so there was no way to provide meat. After thinking about it, he still gave Cheng Yaojin a regretful look. Cheng Yaojin was extremely disappointed. However, the military camp was his second home. How could he give it up just like that? So he looked at Fengzi and asked, "Fengzi, can your training method be promoted in the military camp?" As soon as he said that, Li Shimin's eyes became bright. He was naturally concerned about this problem. If not all of them had to eat meat, it could be promoted. However, Zhang Feng said casually, "It can be done." As he said that, he took out a few cigarettes from his waist and distributed them to everyone. Then he lit one for himself and took a deep breath before saying, "It can be used in the military camp, but this method consumes a lot of food. To be precise, it consumes meat. The trainers have to eat meat at least once a day, Otherwise, their bodies will become useless. Eat meat at least once a day? Cheng Yaojin's heart seemed to be hit by something and shattered with a bang. The food in the military camp was already scarce. Sometimes they only had 2 meals a day, and they were all eating coarse grains. It was good enough if they could eat meat once a week. How could there be meat for the soldiers to eat? In an instant, he felt that his heart had fallen to the bottom. It seemed that this training method could not be promoted. Just as he was feeling sad, Zhang Feng said again, although the trainers need to eat meat every day, the military camp can't satisfy them. The military camp can set up a small team to train first and see the results. If this small team works well, we can specially train this small team in the future. A small team should be able to provide enough meat, right? This idea was the same as the idea of the guards in his yard. They would only set up a small team, and then focus on training this small team. In the future, this small team would specialize in some tasks that were difficult for ordinary people to complete, such as assassinations, climbing some very high mountains, and so on. It could also be understood as a special force. Cheng Yaojin had been in the military camp for half of his life, so he could naturally understand the meaning of Zhang Feng's words. The overall quality of the soldiers of the Tang dynasty was relatively high, but they were not particularly outstanding. Of course, there were also figures at the general level, but there was still a gap between those soldiers. According to Feng Zi's idea, if they could really set up a small team, they not only needed to be proficient in training methods, but also needed to be proficient in sabers, spears, swords, halberds, and firearms. If they went to the battlefield in the future, they would definitely be good fighters. Chapter 2064. Thinking of this, he turned to look at Li Shimin and said solemnly, Master, I think Fengzi's method can work. Train a small team, and let these guys be proficient in all kinds of martial arts and weapons in the military camp. They will undoubtedly become a thorn in our side. Li Shimin glanced at Cheng Yaojin but didn't say anything. In fact, he was also thinking about it. Fengzi's method just now could be tried. The Tang dynasty could still afford a small team of meat, and there wouldn't be too much loss. It didn't matter if it failed, but if it succeeded, it would be different. As old Cheng said, if this small team was proficient in all kinds of military equipment and firearms, they would definitely become a thorn in the battlefield in the future. After thinking for a while, he turned to look at Zhang Feng and said, Fengzi, your training method is really good. I'll try it when we go back and see the effect. Zhang Feng nodded, took a puff of his cigarette, and said, You should try it. I've even thought of the name of the team. It'll be called the Army Special Forces. Army Special Forces? Li Shimin lowered his head and muttered silently. He was a little puzzled and asked, Why do you want to call it the Army Special Forces? Zhang Feng turned to look out of the door, and pointed to the open space outside with his right hand holding the cigarette. He looked sideways and said, Land means land. The Army Special Forces are troops that can participate in any battle on land. If there is a chance in the future, I will also make the Navy Special Forces. Sea means water. Just like the Army Special Forces, the Navy Special Forces are troops that can participate in any battle on the sea. In fact, he also wanted to say the Air Force Special Forces, but after thinking about it, he held back because the hot air balloon technology was still incomplete. It hadn't been mass-produced, so it was impossible to complete air operations. However, his ideas shocked Li Shimin. He had never thought that soldiers could be used in this way. What kind of special forces were they? If that was the case, wouldn't the combat power of the Tang dynasty's army be doubled? Thinking of this, he turned to look at Zhang Feng and said solemnly, Fengzi, is what you said true? Do you have a specific plan? Of course it's true. Zhang Feng's eyes widened as if he was afraid that others would not believe him. Of course there is a specific plan. Don't worry, let's talk about it while eating. After saying that, he turned his head and shouted towards the door, Old Du, remove the base of the pot and make a new pot of spicy. As soon as he finished speaking, Du Ziting led the servants in carrying the hot pot, and quickly changed the bottom of the pot. Lao Li, Old Cheng, come and sit down. Zhang Feng waved to the group, then found a seat and sat down. After everyone was seated, he said, Actually, I've already formulated the plan, but I didn't write it down. Let me tell you. Li Shimin and the others nodded in unison, putting on the appearance of students listening to their teacher. Even Wei Zheng and the others looked at Zhang Feng with great interest. Although they were not very interested in military affairs, they also knew that if they wanted to rule a country, military affairs were inseparable, so they wanted to learn something from it. Zhang Feng seemed to be enjoying everyone's attention. He took a deep puff of his cigarette and said, "If it's a military camp, I suggest setting up a team of 10 people, because my original intention when I set up the special forces was to let them do things that ordinary people can't do. If there are too many people, it'll be easy to be exposed, but if there are too few people and they're not strong enough, 10 to 15 people would be just right. 10 people would be the best, with one leader and one deputy leader, and they would undergo high-intensity training every day. As for the training, you've seen it just now, and I've also told you that it'll be crueler and harsher than ordinary soldiers. You don't have to use these special forces in normal battles, but when it comes to carrying out special operations, such as assassinating the leader of an enemy country, protecting a certain high-ranking official, and so on, these people can be deployed." Hearing this, Li Shimin understood. The special forces that Feng Zi was talking about were to carry out missions that ordinary soldiers couldn't carry out. If that was the case, it wouldn't be a big deal to spend some money to raise these guys. Perhaps there would be some unexpected gains. After thinking about it, he nodded and said, "Feng Zi, your idea is useful. I'll talk to the imperial court about it later." Qing Yaojin was delighted. He knew that Li Shimin's words meant that he agreed. Now that he was the first to know, he might be able to seize the leadership of the special forces. The more he thought about it, the happier he was. He picked up the wine pot and poured Li Shimin and Zhang Feng a cup each. He smiled and said, Come, drink." Zhang Feng and Li Shimin looked at each other, smiled, and drank the wine in one gulp. "Right, Feng Zi?" Li Shimin thought of something and turned to look at Zhang Feng. "Have you prepared your plan for going to Jiangnan? Do you have any plans in mind?" As soon as he said this, everyone turned to look at Zhang Feng. They all knew that Zhang Feng was going to Jiangnan. At first, they tried to persuade him to stay, but he didn't want to. Now that he insisted on leaving, they naturally cared about what would happen after he went to Jiangnan. Chapter 2065. Zhang Feng put down the wine bowl and glanced at the crowd. With a solemn expression, he said, "I heard that the prices in Jiangnan have risen a lot. I plan to go over and stabilize the prices first." Li Shimin picked up a peanut and put it into his mouth. He asked curiously, "Then what are you going to do? The rising prices should be caused by the clans. They want to suck the blood of the people. If you want to stabilize the prices, you are undoubtedly cutting off their source of income. I'm afraid it's a bit inappropriate to go against them as soon as you go, right?" "That's right." Wei Zheng stroked his white beard and nodded. "The clans have been entrenched in Jiangnan for a long time. Feng Zi, you should go over now to develop your power. You shouldn't go against them immediately. Otherwise, I'm afraid." At this point, he laughed bitterly. The meaning behind his words was self-evident. In fact, he was not from the clans, but he had interacted with many clans before, so he was quite familiar with them. He deeply understood that the clans were deeply rooted in the Tang dynasty, especially in Jiangnan. If Zhang Feng suddenly attacked the clans like this, it would probably bring about unspeakable consequences. However, Zhang Feng did not seem to care. He smiled and said, "I understand what you're saying. However, think about it. Who will suffer the most when the clans raise the prices?" "Of course, it's the people," Li Shimin said without hesitation. As the ruler of a country, he was naturally familiar with the strategies of governing a country. The clans were the ones in power, and once the prices were raised, the people had no way of doing anything. This was because these things were all controlled by the clans, and the people could only pay a high price to buy the necessities of life. Naturally, the money would fall into the hands of the clans. Zhang Feng nodded. His face darkened as he said, "Laoli, you're right. The clans are powerful in Jiangnan, but they exploit the people all year round. Just this time, they raise the prices to suck the blood of the people. I believe that the people dare not say anything to these clans. Therefore, I'm going over this time to win over the hearts of the people and help them stabilize the prices." This way, I can win over a portion of the people's hearts. Secondly, I can take the opportunity to develop my power. Thirdly, I can suppress the arrogance of the clans. Li Shimin nodded. He felt that this method was not bad, but he soon felt that something was wrong. He said, Fengzi, the people of Jiangnan have been bullied by the clans for a long time. This is not wrong, but how can you guarantee that you can subdue them? Make them stand on your side? Moreover, the clans will not let you go. Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, I don't care about the commoners standing on my side. I just want the commoners to not help the clans. In any case, we should try our best to mobilize the power of the masses. If we really can't mobilize them, then we should tell them not to stand on the side of the clans. As for the clans, they aren't scary at all. Think about it. The reason why a clan is prosperous is because of the number of talents that come out. For a large clan like the clans, there are countless talents in their ranks. Weakness? Zhang Sun Wuji was a little puzzled. How could there be a weakness when the clan was big? Didn't everyone hope that the bigger the clan, the better? Only then could they ensure the prosperity of the clan. Why would Fengzi say that? The reason why he had these questions was because he belonged to a big clan. Although it was not considered a clan, he was still a relative of the royal family. Until now, he still did not know about the shortcomings of the clan. Now that Fengzi said it, he could not help but ask, Fengzi, you just said that a big clan has a fatal weakness. What is the weakness you are talking about? As soon as his voice fell, the people present who were deep in thought turned their eyes to Zhang Feng. In fact, they were also thinking about this question because in everyone's eyes, a big clan was undoubtedly a great thing. This way, more talents could be left for the clan. Zhang Feng smiled, shook his head and said, maybe in everyone's eyes, a big clan is a great thing and there are no disadvantages, but in my eyes it is different. Everything has advantages and disadvantages. Even a big clan is no exception. Think about it, if a big clan is big, there will definitely be more people. With more people, the clan will definitely be difficult to manage. Many people will start to have disloyalty, and everyone's strength will not be in one place, so the clan will be easier to be defeated by others. Li Shimin turned his head and glanced at the crowd. He should have the most right to speak on this matter. Not to mention the other branches of the Li family, just the imperial family alone seemed to be in line with Fengzi's words. With more people, many people will start to have disloyalty. Back then, didn't eldest brother and third brother ostracize him? Otherwise, why would the Xuanwu Gate incident happen? Thinking about it carefully, Fengzi's words did make some sense. Wei Zheng and the others also lowered their heads in silence because they all remembered some of the things they had dealt with in the past, such as the eldest son and the second son fighting for property, the first wife and the concubine fighting for favor, and so on. These things combined with what Fengzi said seemed to be true. Chapter 2066. Looking at the way everyone lowered their heads, Zhang Feng smiled and said, you should all have some experience, right? Therefore, for a big family like the clan, the internal conflicts must be very serious. When the time comes, we can take advantage of this. Li Shimin nodded and said, Fengzi, you can grasp this point yourself. I believe you should be able to do it, right? Zhang Feng nodded slightly, took a deep puff of his cigarette, and said, of course that's not a problem. Although I don't have 100% confidence in the clan, I will make them have an easy time. That's good. Li Shimin smiled, picked up a piece of braised meat, and said with a smile, you don't just use these methods to suppress prices, right? Laoli, you know me well. Zhang Feng patted Li Shimin's shoulder, then poured a glass of wine for the latter and said with a smile, come, let's talk while drinking. After drinking the wine, Zhang Feng wiped the corner of his mouth and continued, you also know that Jiangnan is an important port. I plan to open up the water transportation in Jiangnan to Chang'an and the whole country. Water transportation? Li Shimin was a little absent-minded. He vaguely remembered the scene of Emperor Yang of Sui dynasty building the Grand Canal. At that time, countless men in Jiangnan were used by Yang Guang as laborers, and then used as coolies to build the Grand Canal. At that time, this project could be said to have caused the people's resentment to boil. Countless people died tragically because of the construction of the Grand Canal. Fortunately, with the help of countless working people, this unprecedented canal was built, and Yang Guang also paid a painful price for his tyranny. However, this canal played an important role. From Yuhang, now Hangzhou, in the south to Zhuojian, now Beijing, in the north, all the people along the river benefited. However, Fengzi said that if he wanted to open up the water transportation, he had to go through the Grand Canal, and he had to have his own boat to pass through the Grand Canal. This was not a small amount of money, but first of all, the clan occupied the riverbed. Would they let Fengzi pass through the Grand Canal? He was puzzled and asked, Fengzi, I have no objections to you opening up the water transportation. After all, water transportation is the fastest method of transportation. However, the Grand Canal has always been the territory of the clans. Why would they agree to let you open it? Zhang Feng took a sip of wine and said with a smile, Of course the clan won't agree to let me get through, because this will harm their interests. However, if I ask them to split the profits, they will definitely agree. Li Shimin was even more confused. Didn't Fengzi want to get rid of the clan? Why did he have to give the clan a share? Wasn't this cutting off his own path of retreat? He could only ask, why do you want to give them a share? What you're doing is encouraging their arrogance. Sharing is a plan for the future when there is no other way. Zhang Feng sighed and said, Think about it. If I establish a force there, I will naturally not give them a share. However, if the force is not completely established, if I don't give them a share, they will definitely not agree to let me open up the waterway. However, if I give them the waterway, with the greedy character of the clan, they will definitely agree. Of course, the share is not for nothing. After it is completely opened in the future, I will naturally take it back. Hearing this, Li Shimin finally understood. This was a typical example of burning the bridge after crossing the river. However, this idiom was not suitable for Zhang Feng. It could only be said to be a blow to the clan. After all, those guys were used to being tyrannical in Jiangnan. They should have been like this long ago. Thinking of this, he turned to look at Zhang Feng and said with a smile, Fengzi, you're right. I support you. I, Old Cheng, also support you. Cheng Yaojin grinned and picked up a jar of wine. He smiled and said, Come drink. Drink. Zhang Feng also raised his wine glass and bumped into Cheng Yaojin's, drinking in a mouthful. Sai Fengzi, since you're going to Jiangnan, bring our Tainyo with you. Cheng Yaojin turned his head and patted Cheng Chimo's shoulder. Then he turned his head to look at Zhang Feng and said with a smile, Tainyo has been strong since he was young. If he goes with you, he might be able to help you. At the same time, you can also let this stinky brat gain some knowledge. These words were from the bottom of his heart. Before Cheng Chimo met Zhang Feng, he was a little devil. He spent his days fighting with grasshoppers, gambling, going to brothels and flaunting his prowess on the streets. Anyway, as long as it was a bad thing, this brat had done it all. He even fought with Zhang Sunchong and Fang Yai, who were called the four tyrants of Chang'an. He had beaten them many times, but he couldn't beat them every day. If he didn't beat them, this brat would go out to drink and have fun. However, once he met Zhang Feng, this brat seemed to have changed. He was not like before and was even more obedient. Therefore, he really wanted Zhang Feng to bring this brat to Jiangnan to gain some knowledge. Secondly, Zhang Feng could help educate him. Seeing this, Li Shimin's heart was also moved. This was because he also wanted Zhang Sunchong to go to Jiangnan. Zhang Sunchong was his nephew, a standard royal relative. Usually he was a treasure in Zhang Suan's family. Zhang Sun Wuji was afraid that he would melt in his mouth and break in his hands. This also led to this brat's arrogant and despotic character. He was like Ching Chimo, but more serious than Ching Chimo. He also changed because he met Zhang Feng. If this brat also went to Jiangnan, perhaps he would change. At least, he would be much better than before. Chapter 2067. Thinking of this, he turned to look at Zhang Feng and said with a smile, Fengzi, why don't you bring Buggy along as well? As he spoke, he saw Du Go, who had dodged to the side, and hurriedly said, And Dabing, why don't you bring all three of them along? The moment he said that, Zhang Sun Wuji shuddered. He knew how dangerous Jiangnan was. Although it was known as the land of fish and rice, with countless talents and beauties, there were also many clans. If something happened to his son, what would he do? Especially since Zhang Sunchong was the only son of the Zhangsun family. If he was gone, then the entire Zhangsun family would be gone. At this moment, he really wanted to refute, but thinking that this was what Li Shimin had said, he held back. He could only look at Zhang Feng with a pleading expression, hoping that he would not let his son go to Jiangnan. Du Ruhui, on the other hand, did not think much of it. This was because the Du family had always been very strict. If his son was useless, he would be too embarrassed to meet others. However, Du Go was a little disappointing. He hung around Cheng Chimo and the others every day. If he went to Jiangnan with Fengzi, it would not be a bad thing. Moreover, the Du family had more than one son. Du Go still had an older brother. What was there to be afraid of? However, Zhang Feng waved his hand and said helplessly, "It's not that I don't want to bring Tai Niu and the other two to Jiangnan, but I can't. If too many people go, it will easily attract the attention of the Jiangnan clans. If Tai Niu and the others stay in Chang, and they can help me attract some of the clan's attention. Moreover, they won't be of much help even if they go. Most importantly, I've given them an important task." Li Shimin frowned and glanced at Cheng Chimo and the others. He asked in surprise, "What task did you give them?" "Steam engine." Zhang Feng glanced at the crowd, but when he saw the puzzled look on their faces, he could only explain, "It's a machine that uses steam as the raw material and can generate power. In the future, it can be used on cars and ships." Li Shimin turned to look at Du Ruhui and the others, but the latter acted as if they had never heard of it before. However, he had never heard of it before, so he could only ask, "Fengzi, can that thing you mentioned really work? Using steam as a raw material? Why haven't I heard of it before?" "I can't explain it to you in a short time." Zhang Feng curled his lips and helplessly said, "All you need to know is that this thing will be used on ships in the future. Right now, Iron Bull and the others are working on it. That's why I asked them to stay." Hearing this, everyone was confused. However, they finally understood why Iron Bull and the others could not go. They had to stay in Chang, and to research something important. "Fengzi, if you don't bring Tai Niu and the others, who will you bring? Who can keep you safe?" Chapter 2068. Everyone present nodded. They were all people who knew Zhang Feng better. They were his relatives and friends. They had been worried about Zhang Feng's marriage. They had thought of many ways to make him get married, but Zhang Feng always found an excuse to refuse. This time Li Shimin was present, so they naturally had to help. Besides, Zhang Feng was not young anymore. Children of his age were old enough, but he was still a virgin. It was really troublesome. Zhang Feng naturally understood everyone's thoughts, but as a modern person he had always been disgusted with arranged marriages. It was not that he did not like Zhang Yuyao. After getting along with her for such a long time, even if there were no feelings, there would be feelings. It was just that he really did not like this. There was also the system. From the beginning until now, the system had not been awakened. He had been looking forward to the day when the system was awakened. When the system was awakened, it would not be too late to get married at that time. After thinking about it, he shook his head and said, "I know your good intentions, but I have no intention of getting married now. The Jiangnan clan has not been eliminated, and the Zhang family has not been promoted. I really have no intention of getting married." He did think so. Now the clan regarded him as a thorn in their flesh. If he got married, it would harm Zhang Yuyao and Jingshu. Moreover, he also wanted to revive the Zhang family. Now the Zhang family had some reputation in Chang, but it was not enough in the Tang dynasty, so he still did not want to get married. However, Li Shimin was not willing. He looked at Zhang Feng with a serious face and said, "Fengzi, think about it. Zhang girl is not afraid of being ridiculed by others, but she still wants to go to Jiangnan with you. If you don't give her a status now, won't you disappoint her? The most important thing is, if you leave, how can Zhang Yuyao's parents establish themselves in Chang'an? Their daughter going on a long journey with another man is not pleasant to hear. Aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by others?" Zhang Feng was speechless for a while. He didn't want to hurt Zhang Yuyao's feelings. because the two of them were previously engaged and could be considered as an unmarried couple. Even if they went to Chang'an, it was okay to attract some gossip. Anyway, he didn't care. But Zhang Yuyao might feel a little uncomfortable. But since they had decided to go to Chang'an, it should be fine. However, he really didn't think about Zhang Yuyao's parents. If he left, what would happen to Zhang Yuyao's parents? Although the people of the Tang dynasty were much more liberal, there were still some conservative ideas. If they left, the people in Chang'an would definitely point fingers at Zhang Yuyao's parents. The only way was to take Zhang Yuyao's parents away, but this method was obviously not suitable. Then he could only settle them down when he went to Chang'an, visit them first, and fix his and Zhang Yuyao's status. After thinking about it, he turned to look at Li Shimin and said helplessly, "I really didn't think of it just now. But fortunately, you reminded me." Li Shimin was delighted. This kid finally understood. It seemed that he was finally getting married. Just as he was about to ask if they were going to get married, Zhang Feng's words surprised him. "When I leave, I'll help Yuyao's parents settle down. I'll also fix my relationship with Yuyao again. I promise that Yuyao's parents won't worry." Li Shimin really wanted to curse at this moment. Lao Tzu wanted him to get married. After thinking about it, he held back and put on a sincere expression. "Fengzi, do you really not understand, or are you pretending not to understand? I said this because I want you to get married as soon as possible, preferably before you go to Jiangnan." Among all the people present, he and Zhang Feng had a deep relationship. It could be said that they were friends despite the difference in age. Therefore, he hoped that Zhang Feng would get married and leave a bloodline for the Zhang family. However, this guy didn't understand no matter how he persuaded him, which made him very annoyed. Zhang Feng naturally understood Li Shimin's intentions, but he already had a plan in mind. He could only say, "Lao Li, I understand your intentions, but I don't want to get married now. Besides, getting married now won't do me any good." "No good?" Li Shimin was a little confused. How could there be no good in getting married? Getting married could carry on the family line. You could also do some things that you didn't want to do but had to do. There were so many benefits. But this guy said there were no benefits? He laughed. At this moment, he thought that Fengzi was really a child. How could he say such things? However, he didn't get angry. He only asked with a playful expression, "You just said that getting married won't do you any good. Then tell me the reason. If the reason is sufficient, then I won't force you." Zhang Feng smiled. He picked up a bowl of wine and took a sip before saying, "First, I am now on the opposite side of the 5 surnames and 7 expectations. In other words, I am now their enemy. If I get married now, the people around me will definitely face more or less danger." "What kind of *T reason is that?" Cheng Yaojin glared at Zhang Feng with an indignant expression. How powerful can the people of the 5 surnames and 7 expectations be? Lao Tzu doesn't believe that they will dare to touch the people around you after you get married. Chapter 2069. He had always disliked the people of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes because they bullied others. Of course, part of it was because of the tigress at home. His wife was also a woman of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes, and she was a top surname of Cui. For various reasons, he did not have a good impression of the clan, especially the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. Li Shimin glanced at Qing Yaojin with disdain. He was obviously afraid of the Cui family at home. But now that he was out of the house, he began to boast that he was not afraid of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. But disdain was disdain. In fact, he still agreed with Qing Yaojin. No matter how bold the 5 surnames and 7 hopes were, they still did not dare to enter Chang'an. However, if they were out of Chang'an, it would be different. So Zhang Feng's words were somewhat reasonable. So he could only say, "Fengzi, continue. Don't pay attention to this fool." Zhang Feng knew Qing Yaojin's temperament, so naturally he was too lazy to care. He lit a cigarette and continued. "Second, I am now in the development stage of my career. It is not suitable for me to get married at all. Otherwise, it will distract me." Li Shimin rolled his eyes at Zhang Feng. "What kind of reason is that? Continue." Zhang Feng smiled awkwardly. In fact, this was something that he had forcibly put together. Otherwise, he would have to face Lao Li's forced marriage. In fact, his real reason was the system, but how could he dare to say this to everyone? So he had to lie. Also, I want to glorify the Zhang family. Now that the Zhang family is in decline, I can't go on like this. Most importantly, I want to create a perfect world for the world. Perfect world? Li Shimin was interested and asked curiously, what does the perfect world look like? Zhang Feng picked up the wine bowl and took a sip. There was a trace of a proud smile on his lips. Last time, I told Xuanzang. Since you want to hear it, I will say it again. It is that there is no dispute in the world, no difference in culture, no entanglement between people. Choose the virtuous and the capable, and speak of faith and harmony. Old friends do not only have relatives, but also have children. So that the old have a purpose, the strong have a purpose, the young have strengths, the lonely and disabled, all have a purpose. There was a place for men and a place for women. Evil goods should be discarded from the earth, and should not be hidden from oneself. Evil strength should not come from the body, and should not be hidden from oneself. You are deliberately keeping your schemes closed and not prospering, stealing and rioting but not doing it, being an outsider but not closing your doors. Li Shimin felt that something was wrong and hurriedly said, didn't you say Elysium last time? Zhang Feng's mouth twitched. He had been seen through by this guy, but his face remained calm. That was just to fool Xuanzang. Anyway, the meaning is the same. I'll only get married after I've completed all of this. Li Shimin's eyebrows jumped and he hurriedly said, when will this be completed? If we don't complete it, won't we never get married? Zhang Feng waved his hand and said indifferently, yes, we won't get married if we don't finish it now. It didn't matter whether Lao Li believed him or not, as long as he didn't force him to get married. Li Shimin naturally saw some clues and didn't want to continue to force him. He could only say, forget it, I don't want to care about your marriage, but you must take care of the matter of going to Jiangnan. Don't let the Zhang family be ridiculed. Zhang Feng nodded. When he was talking about Zhang Yuyao's parents, he already had a plan in mind. Naturally, he wouldn't make things difficult for Zhang Yuyao's parents. Master! Master! At this moment, Du Ziting's voice came from outside the door. Zhang Feng looked up and saw Du Ziting running in quickly. Master, there's a worker outside the door asking to see you. He said that the potatoes you planted are ripe, and he brought a bag over. Really? Zhang Feng was overjoyed. He suddenly stood up and wanted to run out of the door. In a moment, he was outside the door and saw a worker carrying a bag. Zhang Feng hurriedly said, open the bag and take a look. Hearing this, the worker hurriedly opened the bag because he knew that this was the boss's house. He saw the bag open and the round potatoes inside appeared in front of him. Zhang Feng's eyebrows raised in joy. He grabbed a potato and weighed it in his hand. This potato was at least 8 taels to 1 catty. It was basically the size of 3 fists. Such a big potato was enough for a family to eat. Of course, it wasn't all potatoes. Old Du, immediately send these potatoes to the kitchen and cut them into slices. Then send them to the hall. Zhang Feng happily handed the potatoes to Du Ziting. Yes, master. Du Ziting took the potatoes and turned to leave. Zhang Feng turned to look at the worker. Go to the accounts room to get some money and go back first. Tell your leader that I'm going to take a look later. The worker nodded and turned to leave. Zhang Feng also walked to the hall. As soon as he entered the door, he laughed and said, Lao Li, I'll give you something good to eat later. Li Shimin turned his head with a puzzled expression. What good thing? Zhang Feng chuckled. You'll know soon enough. As soon as he finished speaking, Du Ziting walked in with a servant carrying a plate. On the plate were the slices of potatoes. Li Shimin looked at the plate with a puzzled expression. What's inside? Chapter 2070. Although he had heard Feng Zi talk about potatoes before, he had never seen them, let alone cut them into slices. Zhang Feng took the potatoes from the servant's hand and looked around at everyone with a proud face. These are the potatoes I mentioned before. Now they have been cut into slices. These are potatoes? Cheng Yaojin exclaimed and stared at the potato slices with his eyes wide open. He had heard Feng Zi say that potatoes could yield 1,000 caddies per mu and 2 caddies per year. At that time he didn't believe it. Now looking at the potato slices in front of him, he instantly doubted it. Zhang Feng enjoyed Cheng Yaojin's surprised look. He strode forward, put the potatoes on the table, and said with a smile, "Look, these are the potatoes that can yield 1,000 caddies per mu." Li Shimin picked up a potato slice, his heart full of doubts. Could this thing really yield 1,000 caddies per mu? Although he had heard Feng Zi say it before, he inevitably had some doubts in his heart. So he had to ask, "Feng Zi, can this thing really yield 1,000 caddies per mu? And it can be harvested for 2 seasons?" Zhang Feng nodded solemnly. "Of course, when have I ever lied to you about such an important thing?" Li Shimin fell silent. He was sure Feng Zi had never lied about such an important thing. Wouldn't that be the good news for the people of the Tang dynasty? Would the people of the Tang dynasty not have to starve in the future? Would the soldiers in the barracks have food? Thinking of this, he hurriedly said, "Feng Zi, where are you planting the potatoes? Take us to have a look." Cheng Yaojin pulled Zhang Feng and said eagerly, "Let's go, Feng Zi. Let's go and have a look." "I know you want to have a look." Zhang Feng smiled, then shook off Cheng Yaojin and pointed to the potato slices on the plate. "It's not too late to have a look later. Don't you want to taste the potatoes?" Originally, everyone was still immersed in the joy of the potatoes, but after Zhang Feng said that, everyone's eyes moved to the plate. "That's right, I can take a look at the potatoes later. Now that the potato slices are right in front of me, if I don't try them, wouldn't I be letting myself down? Try it." Cheng Yaojin looked at Li Shimin and asked. Li Shimin was also a little tempted. Since Cheng Yaojin asked, it was not good to say anything. He could only say, "Let's try it. Put it in the pot." As he spoke, he picked up a plate of potatoes and poured them into the pot. Cheng Yaojin also picked up the potatoes and poured them into the pot. After a while, all the potato slices were poured into the pot. Zhang Feng's face sank. He wanted to curse. These guys poured all the potato slices into the pot, and there were still a few that hadn't been cut. He was planning to make potato stew with beef. After thinking about it, he stopped and said, "Everyone sit down. This thing cooks quickly. We can eat it soon." "Is it?" Cheng Yaojin raised his eyebrows in joy. His chopsticks were already in the pot. He scooped up a piece of steaming hot potato slices and blew on it twice. Feeling that it was already cold, he began to eat heartily. After eating a few mouthfuls, he felt that something was wrong. He hurriedly said, "Feng Zi, didn't you say that it would be cooked soon? Why is it not cooked yet?" As he spoke, he swallowed the half-cooked potato slices one after another. "I said it would be cooked soon, but I didn't say it would be cooked now." Zhang Feng looked at Cheng Yaojin with some amusement. However, when he saw that this guy was eating half-cooked, he quickly said, "This is half-cooked. Why are you eating it?" Cheng Yaojin ignored Zhang Feng and ate even more. This was because in his philosophy, food was precious. He was a person who had experienced a great famine. Generally, he didn't know how to eat food. Even now, he was a noble. This was one of his few advantages. "Feng Zi, you don't have to care about this guy." Li Shimin rolled his eyes at Cheng Yaojin, then looked at Zhang Feng and said with a smile, "Are these potatoes cooked?" Zhang Feng said, "Oh." Then he picked up a piece with his chopsticks and tasted it. When he found that there was no problem, he said, "It's cooked. Everyone try it." As soon as he said that, everyone put their chopsticks into the pot, especially Cheng Yaojin. His chopsticks were very fast, as if he was afraid that others would snatch it from him. Everyone put the potatoes into their bowls and found that they were a little hot. They quickly blew on them with their mouths. When the potatoes cooled down, they wolfed them down. Other than Wei Zhang and the other literati who still maintained a steady appearance, Cheng Yaojin and Cheng Chimo didn't care about eating etiquette at all. Their mouths were full of oil. "Feng Zi, why does your potato taste like hot pot no matter how you eat it?" Cheng Yaojin looked at the potato on his chopsticks and seemed to be a little dissatisfied with the taste of the potato. This guy had eaten too much hot pot and always felt that he was eating something spicy. "Aren't you just spouting nonsense?" Zhang Feng rolled his eyes at Cheng Yaojin and said angrily, If the potato doesn't taste like hot pot, what else can it taste like? However, this was not wrong. The potato itself contained a lot of starch, so it didn't have any taste. As long as it was mixed with other seasonings, it would taste like other seasonings. Chapter 2071. Fengzi, what do these potatoes taste like? Li Shimin picked up a piece of potato and looked at Zhang Feng with a puzzled expression. He had eaten too much hot pot, so he couldn't completely taste the potatoes. The taste of potatoes is a little sweet. Zhang Feng glanced at the bottom of the pot, then looked at Li Shimin and said, "The reason why you think it tastes like hot pot is because you've eaten too much hot pot. Also, potatoes are like this. The taste depends on the seasoning you put in them." Li Shimin nodded. "So that's how it is." Zhang Feng glanced at everyone and said, "Okay, now let's go and see where the potatoes are planted." After saying that, he waved his hand and walked out of the door. Li Shimin led everyone and followed closely behind. They had been looking forward to the potatoes for a long time. The group sat in a carriage at the foot of the mountain. Zhang Feng glanced at the endless land and turned to Li Shimin. "Laoli, look, these are the potatoes I asked people to plant." Li Shimin looked at the ground with some puzzlement, then looked at Zhang Feng and asked, "Where are the potatoes?" "The potatoes are all in the soil." Zhang Feng smiled and turned to look at the workers at the side. "Go and dig up the potatoes in the ground." As soon as he finished speaking, the workers who had been waiting for a long time moved. They held hoes in their hands and began to cultivate the soil. After a while, strings of golden potatoes jumped out of the soil. Cheng Yaojin's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He reached out and grabbed one at random and laughed. "Haha, these are F***king potatoes." Li Shimin quickly went forward and picked up a fist-sized potato from the ground. He turned to look at Zhang Feng and asked, "These potatoes are so convenient. Can they be used as military rations?" Obviously, this was the question he was most concerned about. The Battle of Chiotzi was tense and had consumed a lot of food. However, if they had such food, they might be able to alleviate the food shortage. Cheng Yaojin also looked at Zhang Feng with a solemn expression. As a military commander, he naturally attached great importance to these matters. Zhang Feng naturally knew what everyone was thinking, but it was winter now. It was already good enough that they were able to grow potatoes. How could they be used as army rations? This was simply not enough, unless there was a greenhouse. With that thought in mind, he looked at Li Shimin and smiled. The winter harvest is low, so potatoes can't be used as military rations. Li Shimin and Cheng Yaojin's hearts skipped a beat. The situation at the front lines was already tense, and they were running out of rations. If potatoes couldn't be used as rations, what would happen to the front lines? Just as the two of them were feeling despondent, Zhang Feng's voice rang out again. "Although it can't be used as rations for the army now, it can still be improved slightly." "What do you mean?" Cheng Yaojin suddenly grabbed Zhang Feng and said excitedly, "What did you mean just now?" "Let go of me first." Zhang Feng shook Cheng Yaojin's hand. Only then did the latter react. After letting go, he slowly said, "Potatoes are a spring plant. It's not suitable to grow them in winter. It's already very difficult to grow them now, so the yield is very low. However, if you want to produce more, you have to raise the temperature." "Raise the temperature?" Li Shimin was a little confused. How could they raise the temperature? It was already winter, and it was unusually cold. Did they have to change the weather? That was also impossible. After thinking about it, he had no choice but to say, "Fengzi, how can you raise the temperature?" Zhang Feng glanced at the surrounding open space, then looked at Li Shimin and said, "Actually, it's not difficult. You just have to build something like a shed and then light a fire inside. As long as the temperature inside the shed is about the same as spring, then you can plant the potatoes inside. This way, when the temperature inside the shed is raised, the yield of potatoes will naturally increase." "Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and do it." Cheng Yaojin was anxious like a child. "You think I don't want to?" Zhang Feng rolled his eyes at Cheng Yaojin, then slowly said, "The shed needs to be covered with a layer of film. This thing hasn't been developed yet. We can only use the shed when it's developed." Cheng Yaojin hurriedly said, "Then hurry up and develop it." I'm going to Jiangnan soon. How can I have time? Zhang Feng glared at Qing Yaojin, then said, although I don't have time now, this thing can be given to Iron Bull to do. Me? Cheng Chimo widened his eyes and pointed at himself in disbelief. He had been standing there watching the show, and he never thought that the topic would be about him. In the end, this Fengzi just had to talk about him. He could only ask with a confused face, Fengzi, what can I do? Yes, Fengzi, what can Iron Bull do? You'd better give the task to someone else. Zhang Sun Wuji stood up. He glanced at Ching Chimo, then his eyes fell on Zhang Feng. You should give such a difficult task to Buggy. Chapter 2072. Cheng Yaojin was instantly infuriated when he heard this. So this old thief Zhang Sun didn't have good intentions, and wanted to get the good stuff to his son. Although he also admitted that his son Tainyo was disappointing, he still felt a little uncomfortable when others said it out loud, not to mention that it was someone who had become an official. Especially when this person wanted to steal his son's benefits. He was instantly enraged and glared at him. What are you saying, old man? Why can't my Tainyo do it? Make yourself clear. As he spoke, he clenched his fist and acted as if he was going to hit Zhang Sun Wuji. Li Shimin saw that things were bad and quickly went forward to stop Qing Yaojin. He shouted, Old Cheng, what are you doing? Stop it now. When Cheng Yaojin saw that the person who came was Li Shimin, his anger immediately reduced by half. He glared at Zhang Sun Wuji indignantly, and then pushed him aside. After calming down, Li Shimin looked at Zhang Feng and asked with a serious face, Fengzi, continue what you said just now. As for who to give it to, it's not important. The most important thing is how to develop it. Tell me the method. Zhang Feng nodded and said seriously, actually, it's not difficult to make this film. It's a plastic product, and plastic can be made with resin. We have it in the workshop. First, we melt the resin with fire, then dry it and spread it into thin sheets of paper. Hearing this, Cheng Chimo roughly understood, because he had seen the process of dissolving the resin with his own eyes. He said excitedly, Fengzi, I know, isn't it similar to the composite bow? It means that it's similar. Zhang Feng smiled bitterly and said, but the resin has to be spread very thin. Cheng Chimo nodded and didn't say anything else. Fengzi, our Tainyo's comprehension is not bad, right? Cheng Yaojin hugged Zhang Feng and patted Zhang Feng's shoulder casually. Zhang Feng could only reply with a wry smile. He thought to himself, anyone can understand this, right? Iron Bull's perception is good? I really don't know where he got his face from. Fengzi, since Iron Bull understands, then why don't we leave this task to Iron Bull? Li Shimin glanced at Ching Chimo, then looked at Zhang Feng and said, all right. Zhang Feng nodded. Cheng Chimo was the only one suitable for this task. However, Zhang Sun Wuji was a little unwilling. He took a step forward and stared at him. No, what about our bugs? Zhang Feng shook his head. He really didn't know what to do with this guy. He always wanted to poke his nose into everything. He could only say, I've arranged other tasks for Bugs and Debing. If you don't believe me, you can ask them. Zhang Sun Wuji looked at Zhang Sun suspiciously. Zhang Sun said timidly, Fengzi wants us to make the steam engine. Hearing this, Zhang Sun Wuji's competitive heart barely calmed down. All right, since it's all arranged, then there's nothing else? Zhang Feng glanced at everyone. Seeing that no one responded, he said, if there's nothing else, then let's go back? Li Shimin nodded and turned to walk back to Zhang Mansion. Everyone followed closely behind. Back at Zhang Mansion, everyone drank some wine before Li Shimin and the others left. Zhang Feng felt a little drowsy and wanted to sleep. However, he knew that he couldn't sleep now. He still had to meet Zhang Yuyao's parents. So he shouted to the door, Old Du, prepare some gifts. I'm going to Zhang Mansion. As soon as he finished speaking, Du Ziting ran in. He looked at Zhang Feng with a puzzled expression. Master, you're going to Zhang Mansion? Do you want to ask Miss Yuyao to come along? Zhang Feng was stunned. When he was talking with Li Shimin and the others just now, he did not think of this. Now that old Du reminded him, he remembered that if there was anything difficult to reply to when he went to Zhang Mansion later, he would still need Yuyao to do it. Thinking about it, he nodded and said, Then let's ask Yu Yao to come along. Du Ziting nodded and left. He came back in a moment, but he said with a troubled expression, Master, a servant said that Miss Yu Yao went out just now. We don't know where she went. Went out? Zhang Mansion was puzzled. Where could Yu Yao go? Could it be that she went shopping? Or went home? After thinking about it, he still couldn't find an answer. He waved his hand and said, Forget it. Since she went out, I'll go alone. With that, he turned and walked out of the mansion. Du Ziting went to prepare the gifts. Zhang Feng waited at the door for a moment before Du Ziting brought the gifts. Zhang Feng got into the carriage and drove directly to Zhang Mansion. Soon, the carriage stopped in front of Zhang Mansion. Zhang Feng got out of the carriage and straightened his clothes. Then he led the servant carrying the gifts to Zhang Mansion. Hello, young master. The servants of Zhang Mansion bowed in unison. Good, good, good. Zhang Feng replied awkwardly. He didn't really like this title, but ever since he got engaged to Zhang Yuyao, the servants of Zhang Mansion would call him young master whenever they saw him. At first he was shocked. Later he slowly got used to it. However, after not coming for a long time, he didn't feel uncomfortable. Young master, are you here to visit my master? Chapter 2073. The leader of the guards bowed and looked at Zhang Feng with a smile on his face. Ahem. Zhang Feng deliberately coughed twice and glanced at the mansion. He nodded and said, Not bad. Go and inform your master. The servant still had a smile on his face. He stretched out his hand and said, Young master, my master said that you don't have to report your visit. Just enter the hall. As he said that, the servant extended his hand and said with a smile, Young master, please enter the hall. Zhang Feng didn't want to be so close. After all, they weren't married yet. But since Father Zhang didn't want to be so formal, he didn't have to be either. He strode into the hall. After entering the hall, the servant served tea and pulled out a chair. He put on a show of hospitality before leaving. In fact, Zhang Feng wasn't used to this. He was very casual when he was in his own mansion. But when he was in Zhang Mansion, he felt a little restrained. This might be the feeling of a young master visiting his father-in-law's home. He smiled bitterly and took a sip of tea while waiting for Father Zhang to arrive. But at this moment, a burst of light footsteps and hearty laughter sounded. Ha ha ha. Before the laughter died down, a white-haired man appeared in the hall. It was Zhang Yuyao's father. He went straight to Zhang Feng and said, Ha ha ha. Nephew, you're here. Zhang Feng quickly got up and saluted. Hello, Uncle Zhang. Good, good, good. Father Zhang patted Zhang Feng's shoulder and smiled as he pushed Zhang Feng to the seat. Sit, nephew. After that, he strode to the main seat and turned to sit down. He then looked at Zhang Feng and smiled. Nephew, you're here because of the Jiangnan matter, right? Although he stayed in the mansion all year round, he still heard about the news outside. For example, the incident with Xuanzang last time. He had specially sent a servant to inquire about it, but there were too many people, and even the servant couldn't squeeze in. However, this also meant that this future son-in-law was a hero in the hearts of the people of Chang'an. If the son-in-law was a hero, then the father-in-law's status would naturally rise. That was why he was happy. Zhang Feng naturally knew nothing about this. He smiled faintly. That's right, uncle. I'm here because of the Jiangnan matter. You know that this trip is imperative, but he smiled bitterly. I'm worried about Yu Yao. Although Yu Yao and I are engaged, I'm worried about her after she goes to Jiangnan, so. He didn't continue because he knew that Mr. Zhang was a smart man. He didn't need to say anything more to understand what he meant. Sure enough, Father Zhang frowned at first. Then, as if he had figured something out, he laughed loudly. So that's what you're worried about. If that's the case, you don't have to worry. This time, it was Zhang Feng's turn to be puzzled. He quickly asked, Uncle, what do you mean? Father Zhang didn't answer. Instead, he beckoned a servant over and whispered a few words in his ear. Then he smiled and said, Nephew, you can ask Yu Yao when she arrives. Yu Yao? Zhang Feng instantly understood. So Yu Yao had come to the Zhang mansion. Since Yu Yao had come to the Zhang mansion, she must have told them about the Jiangnan matter. A reasonable person like Mother Zhang should be able to understand, right? Just as he was thinking, a burst of brisk footsteps sounded. A moment later, a slim and graceful woman stood in the hall. Beside her was an attractive middle-aged woman. It was Zhang Yuyao and her daughter. Zhang Feng slowly stood up and said softly, "Yuyao?" Zhang Yuyao didn't know why, but she was especially shy in her own home. When she heard Zhang Feng call her that, her face turned red all the way to her neck. She didn't answer, only bowing slightly in return. Mother Zhang was familiar with her daughter's temperament. She pulled Zhang Yuyao behind her and reached out her hand. "Prince Zhang, please sit here. We can talk about it after sitting down." "Thank you, Auntie." Zhang Feng nodded and returned to his seat. Then he looked at Mother Zhang and said, "Auntie, I'm sure you know why I'm here this time?" Mother Zhang nodded slightly and glanced at the shy Zhang Yuyao. Then her gaze fell on Zhang Feng. She smiled and said, "Of course I know. What about Yuyao and Jiangnan?" "Auntie is wise." Zhang Feng cupped his hands and said solemnly, "Auntie, although Yuyao and I are husband and wife in name, we haven't gone through the wedding ceremony. Originally, I didn't plan to take Yuyao to Jiangnan this time because it's really dangerous there. But Yuyao insists on going, so I can only go along with her wishes. But I'm worried that after we go there, people will point fingers at her and the Zhang mansion." Mother Zhang smiled faintly and turned to Zhang Yuyao. "Daughter, what do you think?" Zhang Yuyao secretly glanced at Zhang Feng and quickly covered her face with her handkerchief. Then she looked at Mother Zhang. "Mother, didn't we just discuss it? I must go to Jiangnan with Prince Zhang." Mother Zhang smiled bitterly and helplessly. A grown girl can't be kept at home. After saying that, he turned to look at Zhang Feng and smiled. "Young Master Zhang, we've just discussed it. Yuyao must go to Jiangnan with us. There's no need to argue about this. As for after Jiangnan, it's your business. There may be some gossip, but I don't think anyone knows about your relationship. It doesn't matter. As for Chang'an, you have so many good friends. What are you afraid of?" Chapter 2074. After that, he turned to look at Zhang Feng and smiled. "Prince Zhang, we just discussed it. Yuyao must go to Jiangnan with us. There's no need to argue about this. As for after Jiangnan, it's your business. There may be some gossip, but no one should know about your relationship, so it doesn't matter. As for Chang, and you have so many good friends. What are you afraid of?" Zhang Feng was stunned. Why didn't he think of this? If he had so many good friends in Chang, and after he left, the Zhang mansion would be fine. Thinking of this, he turned to look at Mother Zhang and smiled. "Auntie, you have a point." Mother Zhang nodded slightly and glanced at Zhang Yuyao, whose cheeks were slightly red. Then she looked at Zhang Feng and said, "Prince Zhang, actually, I still hope that you and Yuyao can get married in Chang, and before leaving. After all, you are already engaged. It's not good to keep holding on like this, right? What do you think?" After that, she gave Father Zhang a look. Father Zhang immediately understood. He looked at Zhang Feng and said with a smile, "Prince Zhang, you see, our Yuyao is not young anymore. It's not good for her to run to your mansion every day. It's indeed time to consider marriage." This was also true. Although Zhang Yuyao was engaged to Zhang Feng, she was still not married. It was not nice to run to Zhang Feng's place every day. Father and Mother Zhang had been anxious for a long time. They were worried about their daughter's marriage, but since their daughter came back, she had been talking to Zhang Feng, which made them a little speechless. Now that Zhang Feng was here, they naturally had to talk about it. Faced with such a situation, Zhang Feng had never experienced it. The corner of his mouth twitched, and for a moment he didn't know how to answer. This was because he didn't expect that Mother and Father Zhang would also force him to marry. This was undoubtedly a death sentence for a naive person. However, with the answers he had given to Li Shimin and the others, he felt a little more confident. Thus he smiled faintly and said, "Uncle, Auntie, I'm preparing to go to Jiangnan to develop my career. The situation there is still unclear. It's better to wait until I come back and get married. Besides, I'm currently in the development stage of my career. If I get married rashly, I'm afraid I'll be neglecting Yuyao." Mr. Zhang and Mrs. Zhang looked at each other in dismay. For a moment, They even felt that what this guy said made sense. But when he thought about it carefully, it made no sense at all. He was clearly looking for an excuse not to get married. They still wanted to dissuade him, but after thinking about it, they decided against it. This Zhang Feng looked so determined that it was impossible to persuade him. Father Zhang could only let out a long sigh and faintly said, "Since you say so, then fine. We'll do as you say. Thank you for your understanding, uncle and auntie." Zhang Feng smiled awkwardly and cupped his hands. "Since there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." As he spoke, he waved his hand and the servant behind him came forward. He took the gift from the servant's hand and stood up to place it in front of Father Zhang. He smiled and said, "Uncle, this is a little token of my appreciation." Father Zhang smiled and stood up to accept the gift. "Thank you, dear nephew." Zhang Feng bowed to Mother Zhang again and said with a smile, "Auntie, I'll take my leave." Zhang Yuyao glanced at Zhang Feng. She wanted to say something but stopped. Mother Zhang had already seen through her daughter's thoughts. She smiled and turned to Zhang Feng. "Prince Zhang, wait." Zhang Feng stopped and turned to look at Mother Zhang. Mother Zhang glanced at Zhang Yuyao dotingly and stood up to look at Zhang Feng. "Prince Zhang, isn't Yuyao going to Jiangnan with you? Why don't you take her with you?" Zhang Feng originally wanted to let Zhang Yuyao rest at home for a few more days. It wouldn't be too late to delay the trip to Jiangnan for a day. Anyway, he hadn't finished his business in Chang'an. Now that he heard Mother Zhang say this, he didn't argue and said, "Thank you, Auntie." Zhang Yuyao glanced at Zhang Feng, and then bowed to Mother Zhang and Father Zhang. After all, this trip to Jiangnan was hundreds of miles away from Chang'an. It was uncertain when they would come back. Naturally, they had to bid farewell to their parents. Then, Zhang Feng and Zhang Yuyao got into the carriage and drove to the Zhang mansion. In the carriage, the blush on Zhang Yuyao's face had yet to recede. Perhaps it was because her parents were by her side just now, and she felt shy. Looking at it now, it was as if the white clouds were dyed with a red blush. She raised her head slightly and glanced at Zhang Feng. Then she lowered her head and said softly, "Prince Zhang, my parents had a conflict just now. Please forgive them." "Ah." Zhang Feng suddenly raised his head. He was thinking about what to do after going to Jiangnan, and didn't hear Zhang Yuyao clearly. He said a little belatedly, "What did you say just now?" Zhang Yuyao saw that Zhang Feng was a little absent-minded. She said coquettishly, "Nothing." "Oh." Zhang Feng nodded slightly. Then he seemed to think of something and said, "What did you and Auntie discuss just now?" "Just now, I told Mother that I would go to Jiangnan with you." Zhang Yuyao clutched the corner of her clothes, and her face was a little red. Zhang Feng finally understood. No wonder his conversation with Father and Mother Zhang went so smoothly. It turned out that this girl helped him from behind. Thinking about it, he smiled and said, "Thank you, Yuyao." Chapter 2075. Zhang Yuyao blushed and shook her head. It was embarrassing for a girl like her to talk about this kind of thing. After all, she hadn't married Zhang Feng yet. She felt a little ashamed to speak for Zhang Feng in front of his parents. Now Zhang Feng said so, she didn't know how to answer. But at this moment, the neighing of horses came from outside the carriage and the carriage stopped. "Master, we've arrived at the mansion." A voice came from outside the carriage. Zhang Feng nodded slightly and helped Zhang Yuyao get off the carriage. "Yuyao, go back to your room and have a rest." Zhang Feng let go of Zhang Yuyao and said with a smile. Zhang Yuyao nodded slightly, bowed, and turned to her room. Zhang Feng also turned to the study and said to Du Ziting as he walked, "Go to the study and pour a cup of tea. And don't let anyone disturb me in the study." Du Ziting frowned. He knew that the master usually didn't go to the study. Why did he go to the study today? But seeing that the master was in a hurry, he didn't ask more. He nodded and left. Zhang Feng didn't say anything along the way. Soon he came to the study. He found a piece of paper and spread it out. Then he started to write. The year-end examination was about to begin. He needed to draw up the curriculum for the students of the academy. The students of the academy had been learning the middle school curriculum. This time he needed to draw up the college curriculum for the students. After writing for a while, Du Ziting gently pushed the door and came in. Seeing that Zhang Feng was writing attentively, he gently put the tea on the table and left. After writing for a while, Zhang Feng felt that his hands were a little sore. After all, he had rarely written since he came to the Great Tang, and most of the work was done by others. He could only rest for a while, light a cigarette, and slowly smoke it. After the cigarette went out, he began writing again. After about half an hour, the curriculum was finally prepared. Zhang Feng stood up and stretched his body. Then he lit up a cigarette and sat down on the chair, smoking with a face full of enjoyment. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. Zhang Feng stubbed out the cigarette and glanced outside the door. Who is it? Master, Mr. Zihuai is here. Du Ziding's voice came from outside the door. The old scholar? Zhang Feng, a little confused, frowned. Wasn't the academy preparing for the year-end examination? The old scholar should be very busy. Why did he have time to come to the mansion? Even though he didn't understand, he still got up and walked towards the door. Coming, coming. Before he could reach the door, he heard a jia sound as the door was pushed open. A familiar face came into view. It was the old elementary scholar. Old scholar, why are you here? Zhang Feng asked subconsciously. Why? Can't old man? The old scholar smiled playfully, and then stepped through the door. He glanced at Zhang Feng and said, The old man is looking for you. Do you think the old man is willing to come? Zhang Feng smiled and closed the door, blocking Du Ziding outside. He knew that if the old scholar was looking for him, there must be something. As expected, the old scholar found a chair and sat down. He glanced at Zhang Feng and said seriously, Fengzi, are you ready for the curriculum after the new year? I've been ready for a long time. Zhang Feng smiled awkwardly and walked to the desk. He was about to pass the curriculum to the old scholar, when he found that the ink on it was still wet. He smiled and said, Take a seat first. I'll pass it to you later. The old scholar's eyes were sharp. How could he not see Zhang Feng's little movements? But he was not in a hurry, so he didn't care. He smiled and said, Take a seat. I have something to ask you. Zhang Feng nodded and found a seat near the old scholar. He asked, What's the matter? The old scholar said seriously, Fengzi, when do you plan to leave? As soon as possible. Zhang Feng waved his hand and then thought of the curriculum. He smiled and said, I wanted to leave today, but I haven't finished writing the curriculum. I just finished writing it, and I want to leave tomorrow. Tomorrow? The old scholar raised his head and said a few words in his heart. He then looked at Zhang Feng and said seriously, What's the first step of your plan to go to Jiangnan? Zhang Feng was silent for a while and said seriously, The prices of goods in Jiangnan are rising. I want to stabilize them first. Otherwise, the people will have a hard time. The old scholar nodded. He was quite satisfied with Fengzi's plan. At least he could see that this kid cared about the world. He smiled and said, Not bad. This plan is not bad. At least you can win the hearts of the people. As he spoke, he glanced outside the door, and then looked at Zhang Feng. With a mysterious expression he said, Feng, I have a good friend in Jiangnan. He used to be a declining aristocrat. Now he has some coal mining business. You can ask him for help when you go to Jiangnan. Give me that piece of paper, and I'll write down the address for you. Zhang Feng was happy. He needed some hidden power in Jiangnan. This old scholar was no doubt giving him a pillow when he was sleepy. He quickly took a piece of paper and a pen and handed it to the old scholar. Chapter 2076. The old scholar picked up the brush and wrote a line of small characters. Then he handed it to Zhang Feng and said, This is the address. You just need to follow this address, and you will find it. Zhang Feng took the paper and glanced at it. On the paper was written, Wang Shi, living in the Wang mansion beside the Jiangnan Canal Street. After reading it, Zhang Feng folded the paper and cupped his hands. Thank you. You don't have to be so polite with me. The old scholar waved his hand and said carelessly, As long as you are safe in Jiangnan. Then he pointed to the curriculum on the table and said, Give it to me. I will take it back to the academy. Zhang Feng quickly got up and looked at the curriculum. He found that the ink had dried. He handed it to the old scholar and asked, When is the end-of-year examination? The old scholar took the curriculum and glanced at it. Then he said, probably in 2 months. Zhang Feng frowned. He had originally wanted to wait until the end-of-the-year examination before leaving, but now it seemed that it was too late. The time had already been pushed back to the new year. He thought for a moment and said, Old Xiaocai, I won't be able to participate in the end-of-the-year examination. You tell my teachers. The old scholar had known that Zhang Feng would say this, but hearing it with his own ears made him feel uncomfortable. He laughed and scolded. Why don't you go and tell them yourself? Zhang Feng smiled bitterly. If he went and told his teachers, he would be scolded to death. But he would not say this in front of the old scholar. So he said, Aren't I leaving soon? There is no way to tell them. I'd better go and tell them. Forget it, forget it. The old scholar sighed. He knew Zhang Feng's difficulties and did not want to tease him. He smiled and said, Okay, I will go and tell those old guys. After saying that, he turned around and opened the door, walking straight to the door. Looking at the receding figure, Zhang Feng felt reluctant to part with him. Ever since he knew the old scholar, he had been treating him like a nephew. He even sent him a friend's message before he left. This friendship was really better than that of an ordinary master and disciple. For a moment he didn't even want to leave. But he had to go to Jiangnan, because Yu and the clan were there. Master, everything is ready. Du Ziting came over. Zhang Feng's thoughts were interrupted. He glanced at Du Ziting and said, Tell them that we will leave for Jiangnan tomorrow morning. You and the servants will stay here. A complicated look flashed through Du Ziting's eyes. In fact, he wanted to go with his master, but when he heard his master's words, his mood fell to the bottom. Of course, he also knew why his master asked him to stay. The Zhang mansion was so big that no one could take care of it. Other people were not reliable, so he had to stay. At night, the sky gradually darkened. The Zhang mansion seemed to have become deserted all of a sudden. There were no longer the usual sounds of laughter and chatter. There were only lonely lights in the garden. Leaves fell from the trees, as if they were sad for Zhang Feng's departure. There was no snow tonight, but there was still a creaking sound in the courtyard. It was the sound of the servants on night patrol stepping on the fallen leaves. They seemed to be extra diligent tonight. They circled Zhang Feng's room several times, as if they were afraid that something unusual would happen. This was because they knew that their master was leaving the next morning. If they could catch a glimpse of him now, it would be good. Otherwise, they didn't know when they would be able to see him again in the future. Another reason was due to the loyalty of the servants. From the moment they entered the Zhang mansion, it was as if they were deeply tied to their master. Now that their master was suddenly leaving, they were very reluctant. The night passed quickly. Zhang Feng woke up early. When he opened the door, he saw Du Ziting standing outside. Old Du, good morning. Zhang Feng yawned and said with a smile, Tell all the guards to eat and then gather in the front yard. We will leave in a moment. Du Ziting nodded and left. Zhang Feng also went to the hall to eat. Unexpectedly, the two girls had already arrived. When they saw Zhang Feng, they stood up together. Prince Zhang. Have a seat. We'll set off after dinner. Zhang Feng waved his hand to signal the two girls to sit down. He then picked up a bowl of porridge and looked at them. The road to Jiangnan is long. You have to eat more. Otherwise, you can only eat dry food on the road. Chang'an was a few hundred miles away from Jiangnan. Although there were post stations on the way, it was impossible to have fresh food when one was hungry. Moreover, the food on the road was not as good as the food in the Zhang mansion. To put it bluntly, even the dry food in the Zhang mansion could not be compared. Therefore, it was better to eat on the way. A complicated look flashed in Zhang Yuyao's eyes. She was still infatuated with Chang'an. After all, she was born and raised in Guangzhou. If Prince Zhang was not going to Jiangnan, she might not leave Chang'an for the rest of her life. However, since they were going to Chang'an, there was nothing to say. She nodded and ate the porridge. Chapter 2077. Jingshu was a little different. She wasn't from Chang'an, so she didn't have the same infatuation as Zhang Yuyao. So she was still a little disappointed. After the meal, Zhang Feng glanced at the two girls. Go and get ready, then gather at the door. We're about to leave. After that, he turned and walked to the front yard. The guards had already gathered. There were 50 people in total, no more no less. Zhang Feng glanced at the crowd. Let's go. Yes, master. Everyone spoke in unison, and their momentum was loud. Zhang Feng's lips curled up. He didn't neglect the training these days. These guys were as strong as bulls. When they reached Jiangnan, they would definitely become a big killing machine. The Jiangnan clan, prepared to suffer the wrath. He strode to the door, and the guards followed closely behind. The carriage had already been prepared at the gate. Zhang Feng boarded the carriage and waited for the two girls to arrive. After a while, there was a flurry of footsteps. Zhang Yiyao walked over with big and small bags, followed by her maid Xiao Chui. Xiao Chui was also carrying all kinds of bags, and he didn't know what was inside. Zhang Feng's mouth twitched, and he suddenly felt speechless. Yuyao, we're going to Jiangnan, not to take refuge. Why are you carrying so many bags? Also, what's in these bags? Zhang Yuyao stopped and put the bags on the carriage. Then she looked at Zhang Feng and said breathlessly, these are all important things that we girls use. You don't understand. I don't understand. Zhang Feng frowned. As a modern person, what don't I understand? Although he was dissatisfied, he didn't want to argue with this girl. After all, he knew that a good man wouldn't fight with a woman. But why wasn't Jingshu here yet? He turned to look behind Zhang Yiyao. Soon he saw Jingshu's figure. He saw Jingshu holding a pipa and walking over leisurely. That's more like it. It's not like we're taking refuge. Why do we need so many things? Zhang Feng glanced at the two girls and said indifferently, get on the carriage and set off. The two girls lifted their skirts and boarded the carriage one after the other. Zhang Feng glanced at the plaque on the door of the Zhang mansion and looked at the coachman with a complicated expression. Let's go. The coachman understood. He raised his whip and shouted, and the carriage slowly moved forward. Du Ziting led a group of servants to look at the master's back from afar. They knew that this was the master's road to meteoric success from now on, and it was also the road that the master had to take to return home. The carriage went further and further away, speeding along the street. Soon, it was out of the gate of Chang'an city. Time passed little by little. The carriage was on the road. Zhang Feng and the others didn't find any inn on the road, so they could only eat the dry food they brought along. This made the two girls feel a little uncomfortable, especially Zhang Yiyao. She had never suffered any hardships. She basically lived a life of luxury at home. But on the road, she had to eat dry food? They couldn't not eat. There was no fresh food on the road. This made the two girls feel nauseous again and again, and they almost vomited. The good thing was that the dry food was beef jerky. Although it was dry and unpalatable, they could still make do. Zhang Feng was a little better. He didn't care so much. What couldn't he eat? Beef jerky was a good thing. Finally, after more than 10 days, a group of carriages came to the gate of Jiangnan City. The carriage in front was covered with dust. At first glance, the rather gorgeous carriage looked like it had been robbed. However, the carriage behind was a little better. There was basically no dust. The group of carriages stopped. An elegant young man with a folding fan in his hand stepped out of the carriage. He glanced at the bustling street and smiled with satisfaction. Jiangnan is really a rich land. This young man was naturally Zhang Feng. The journey of more than 10 days had made him a little tired. But when he saw the scenery of Jiangnan, he instantly felt a little better. Prince Zhang, look, there's delicious food over there. The one who spoke was Xiao Chui. This girl had been taking care of Zhang Yuyao all the way. She was already suffering. But when she saw the food next to her, she was as happy as a child. She hugged Zhang Yuyao and said with a smile, Miss, there's delicious food over there. Let's go and have a look. Zhang Yuyao wiped the bitter water from the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief and turned to look at Zhang Feng with a pleading face. Zhang Feng was a soft-hearted person. In addition, he was also hungry, so he went with the flow and agreed. The group walked to the front of the stall and found out that they were buying wontons. Zhang Feng was hungry. He didn't care about anything else. He ordered 5 big bowls and wolfed them down. Although Zhang Yuyao was also hungry, she still cared about her status as a lady. She didn't act as presumptuously as Zhang Feng. She chewed and swallowed slowly. Jingshu was the same. She put on the appearance of a lady. But when it was time to pay the bill, Zhang Feng was shocked. What? It's actually 50 copper coins? Chapter 2078. When he was in Chang'an, and the most expensive wonton he had was 2 copper coins, and the cheapest one was 1 copper coin. But in Jiangnan, 5 bowls of wonton actually cost 50 copper coins. It was not that he was stingy and did not want to pay, but the price was too unreasonable. It was several times higher than in Chang'an. Sir, I'm not deliberately asking for a high price, but the price is the same everywhere in Jiangnan. The stall owner put on a pitiful expression. He pointed at the street vendors and said, right now prices in Jiangnan are soaring. The raw materials are more than 5 times more expensive than before, and we bought this place. Every month we have to pay 2 strings of money as a stall fee. Otherwise we can't do business, so we have no choice. The price is the same everywhere in Jiangnan? Zhang Feng was stunned. Before he came, he had heard about how high the prices in Jiangnan were, but he did not expect the prices to be so high. 5 bowls of wontons cost 50 copper coins, which was an average of 10 copper coins per bowl. It was more than 5 times higher than in Chang'an. He could not help but gasp. But more than that, he was resentful because he knew that this was all a trick by the Jiangnan clans. All the financial power and goods in Jiangnan were in the hands of the clans. As long as the prices were raised, they could profit from it and exploit the people's money. These bastards were really inhumane. Even though he was resentful, he still had to pay the money. After giving the money to the stall owner, Zhang Feng walked to the carriage with the 2 girls. But at this moment, a shout came from not far away. Get out of the way. Zhang Feng felt that something was wrong. He turned his head and saw a man dressed in silk rushing over. He was so scared that his face changed. He quickly pushed the 2 girls and Xiao Cui away, but he stumbled. Whoosh! The man suddenly reined in his horse. Seeing that the people on the ground were fine, he suddenly became angry. Where did this bastard come from? How dare you block Lao Tzu's way? Zhang Feng was instantly angry. He stood up and stared at the man with red eyes. Who do you think you are? This road is not your home. How dare you say it is your road? Also, you almost hit Lao Tzu? Hurry up and apologize to Lao Tzu. He didn't want to cause trouble as soon as he arrived, but now that trouble had come to him, he couldn't back down. Otherwise, others would think that he was easy to bully, and he would never be able to make a name for himself. However, this man was clearly not a kind person. When he heard Zhang Feng's words, the veins on his face bulged, and the whip in his hand creaked. How dare you? In all of Jiangnan, no one dares to speak to Lao Tzu like that. Today I actually met someone who doesn't care about his life. As he spoke, he glanced behind him and said coldly, where is the Gao family? Break this dog's legs. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a commotion in the crowd. Dozens of men with sticks in their hands rushed out from the crowd and stood behind the man. Young master. The roar was so loud that it was deafening. Of course, this voice naturally attracted the attention of the surrounding people. Many vendors even stopped doing business and gathered around to watch. Voices of worry, ridicule, and ridicule all entered Zhang Feng's ears. Where did this wild brat come from? How dare he provoke the Jiangnan Gao family? Isn't he seeking his own death? Isn't that right? The Gao family is one of the tyrants of Jiangnan. They control a full 1/7 of Jiangnan's financial resources. Today, this brat fell into the hands of the Gao family's second young master. Maybe he'll die. Not necessarily. Look, this person is also wearing silk. Maybe he's a descendant of that family. Let's take a look first. Hearing the voices of the crowd, Zhang Feng frowned. The Jiangnan Gao family? A full 1/7 of Jiangnan's financial resources? Could it be that this person had 5 surnames and 7 hopes? No, there was no one with the surname Gao among the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. Could it be a branch of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes? He racked his brain and finally found a clue. It was the Fanyang Lu family of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. The Lu family originated with the surname Jiang, and were descendants of Qis Taigong. the Duke of Qi Gaoji, was the ancestor of the surname Liu. His descendants were given the surname Liu because they were enfeoffed with Liu Yi. In 385 BC, Tianhe replaced Qi. The Liu and Gao families were driven out. After leaving Liu Yi, the Liu family lived scattered between Yan and Qin. The main branch lived in Yan. In the Qin dynasty, there was a scholar of the five classics, Liu Ao. His descendants later moved to the Zhuo River and settled in Zhuo County. Because Zhuo County was part of Fanyang County, they were called the Zhuo people of Fanyang. Because of all these reasons, the person in front of him could only be a branch of the Liu family. Because the Liu family was originally surnamed Gao, they later changed their surname to Liu. Only the Liu family of the five surnames and seven hopes had the power to control a seventh of Jiangnan's financial resources. He really didn't expect to get into a fight with the Liu family's henchmen. As soon as he arrived in Jiangnan, he was instantly furious. He glanced at the carriage behind him and shouted, "All the guards of the Zhang family, come out." As soon as he finished speaking, the guards who had been resting in the carriage all got off and stood behind Zhang Feng with Mitsubishi bayonets in their hands. With the addition of the guards, the atmosphere on the scene instantly became incomparably solemn. Chapter 2079. The onlookers subconsciously took a step back, because they could feel the murderous aura coming from these people. It was the aura of someone who had killed someone. It was like a scream from hell. Even so, there were still quite a few brave onlookers who started to discuss. Lao Tzu said that this kid isn't simple. Look, he's really hiding something. He even has a weapon in his hand. I wonder what that weapon is. It looks quite exquisite. I'll get it to play with when I have time. So what if this kid has someone? The second young master of the Gao family also has someone. Moreover, this kid doesn't seem to know young Master Gao's identity. If he does, I wonder if he'll pee in his pants. You guys, the Gao family has been exploiting us for years. Why are you still speaking up for them? You should be cursing the second young master to die a horrible death. When the discussions reached young Master Gao's ears, he already felt a little uncomfortable. At first, he thought that this kid was just an ordinary person. Who would have thought that he could summon so many people with a wave of his hand? He wasn't afraid. With the Gao family's status, they could do whatever they wanted in Jiangnan. Why would they need to be afraid of a kid who was still wet behind the ears? He just felt a little uneasy, because these people gave him the feeling that they were demons from hell. Everyone's hands were stained with blood. Who was he? He was made of porcelain. As for the other side, they were all boorish people. They were all pots. Let me ask you, how can porcelain and earthen pot meet force with force? Moreover, this guy had so many people. He couldn't go head to head with them. It was better to ask about this guy's background first. He repeatedly reminded himself that he wasn't afraid of these kids, or the number of people. With that thought, he turned to look at Zhang Feng and said coldly, "Kid, who are you? Don't you know that I'm the second young master of the Gao family? Do you know the consequences of offending me?" He emphasized the words Gao family and consequences, in an attempt to warn the other party. However, these words were like farts in Zhang Feng's ears. Because he had no intention of letting this guy go. Even if he knew that this guy was a lackey of the Liu family, he was still fearless. Previously, he had already clashed with the five surnames and seven hopes. Now this Liu family's dog was contradicting him. Of course, he would not let him go so easily. He clenched his fist and pointed his index finger at the second young master of the Gao family. "Lao Tzu, listen up. Lao Tzu's name is Zhang Feng. You must have been blind to bump into me, so I'll make you pay." As he spoke, he glanced at the guards behind him and said coldly, "Break one of the legs of that Gao guy." Hearing this, the guards all nodded their heads and walked towards the Gao family's young master with their Mitsubishi bayonets in hand. Gao Ju shivered and thought to himself, not good. He had already announced his name, but this guy didn't seem to be afraid at all. It seemed like he wasn't a good person either. If it were any other time, he would have already ordered his servants to beat them up. But now he felt a little uneasy. They only had a dozen people on their side, while the other side had 50 people. There was a huge difference in numbers. If they fought, they would be at a disadvantage. Retreat? No, if they retreated now, where would the Gao family's face be? After thinking about it, he decided to take a gamble. He glanced at Zhang Feng and said coldly, "Brat, don't think that you can show off just because you have more people. Lao Tzu's Gao family isn't a pushover." As he spoke, he glanced at the servants and shouted, "All servants of the Gao family, kill this brat. Everyone will be rewarded 50 strings of silver." Hearing this, the eyes of the servants behind him instantly turned red. 50 strings of silver? That was 50 strings of silver. Their annual salary was only 5 strings of silver. 50 strings of silver was money that they could only earn in 10 years. Generous rewards would attract brave men. This saying was indeed true. Even though they knew the difference in strength between the two sides, none of the servants retreated. Instead, they gripped their clubs tightly and charged straight at Zhang Feng. The Zhang family's guards didn't hold back either. The Mitsubishi bayonets in their hands creaked. Soon the two groups of people clashed. In an instant, many people fell on the street. Gao Wu's eyes widened because the people who fell were none other than his servants. He thought that even if these fellows couldn't beat the other side, they could at least exhaust some of them. As long as they could delay for a while, his reinforcements would arrive. But he didn't expect these fellows to be so weak. They fell as soon as they clashed. Did he raise them for nothing? Seeing those people with strange weapons coming over, he was a little scared. He turned to glance at Zhang Feng and said, "Brat, Lao Tzu will remember you. See you next time." With that, he quickly turned his horse around and galloped forward. Zhang Feng was a little dismissive of these harsh words. The Gao family was only the Lu family's lackeys. They didn't pose any threat at all. What worried him the most was the Lu family. They were a huge monster. Chapter 2080. Although the Lu family had been recorded since the Qin and Han dynasties, it was during the Eastern Han dynasty that Lu Ji became famous for his Confucianism. Thus, he was called the ancestor of the Lu family. During the Three Kingdoms, Lu Yu held the position of Minister of War of Chao Wei. After that, Lu Qin, Lu Gui, Lu Ji, and Lu Qin held high positions. During the Northern Wei dynasty, Lu Xian entered the imperial court as the first order. During the Emperor Xiaowen's time, Lu Xian became one of the 4 surnames, Lu, Cui, Zheng, and Wang. After the Northern Wei dynasty split, Lu Jing's 3 sons became the imperial tutors of Western Wei, Northern Qi, and Northern Zhou. During the Tang dynasty, they were one of the 7 surnames in 10 families, producing 8 prime ministers. Together with the Cui family of Bowling and the Cui family of Qinghe, they were known as the Cui Lu. Of course, this was not an exaggeration. In fact, the Lu family did indeed have the strength and reputation. Every family held a high position in the imperial court, and were even respectfully called the imperial preceptor. There were countless scholars and beauties. The most important thing was that they settled in Zhuo County, now Zhuozhou Hebei province. It was a flat land with fertile fields, and was famous for being a fertile land. The map of the Yin kingdom that Jing Ke presented when he assassinated the king of Qin was located in this area. The Fanyang Lu family had been farming and studying here for generations. Their descendants had multiplied and become a world-famous aristocratic family. The reason why Zhang Feng was worried was because of the Lu family's geographical advantage. Fortunately, the Lu family had extended their reach to Jiangnan, but the overall family was still in Zhuo County. Therefore, they had to take advantage of the time when these guys were not paying attention to them to develop their power. Thinking of this, he called for the guards to stop. That Gao fellow had already run far away. There was no need to chase after him. It would be bad if the Gao family retaliated. After cleaning up the scene, Zhang Feng began to search for Jia Doran's whereabouts according to the address. Seeing that the guards had left, the Gao family's servants hurriedly got up to chase after their young master. They had failed to protect their young master today, and had to return early to avoid punishment. After chasing for a while, the servants finally saw their young master running on the road. They hurriedly rushed forward and said, young master, young master." Hearing this, Gao Su reined in his horse and turned around abruptly. He lashed out with the horsewhip in his hand and shouted, "You bastards, I was almost beaten to death just now. Are you all dead?" The servants all knelt on the ground, not daring to say a word. silently enduring the young master's anger. Blood splattered all over their backs, and their clothes were torn apart, but their eyes were filled with coldness, because they knew that they couldn't blame the young master. It was all because of that brat called Zhang Feng. In the future, he would definitely tear that brat Zhang Feng into pieces and plant the seeds of hatred. After a moment, Gao Su seemed to be tired of whipping. He withdrew his whip and coldly swept his eyes over the crowd. Where did that reckless brat go? The leader of the guards raised his head slightly, but the cold sweat on his forehead revealed his fear. He said in a trembling voice, "Young master, that brat left with the guards." He left. Gao Su narrowed his eyes and said with a gloomy face, "You're leaving just like that after offending Lao Tzu?" As he spoke, he glanced at the head servant. "You, take 2 men with you and follow that fellow. Find out where that fellow lives. When the time comes, report back to me. The rest of you, follow me back to the residence." After he finished speaking, he whipped his horse and galloped forward. The head servant glanced at the people around him, randomly picked a few, and turned around to leave. The others followed young Master Gao to the Gao residence. A moment later, a huge mansion appeared in front of everyone. There was even a gold-rimmed Phoebe Zhenan wooden plaque hanging on it. There were 2 big words written on it, Gao Mansion. Next to these 2 big words was a line of small words, Fanyang Lu family. Gao Su flipped off his horse like a carp and walked straight to the door. There were 4 servants standing at the door. When they saw that their young master had returned, they hurriedly went to greet him. "Young master, get lost," Gao Su shouted. He was in a bad mood, so how could he let these lowly servants dirty his eyes? Hearing this, the servants hurriedly retreated. They knew that this second young master had a bad temper. Usually he relied on second madam's favor to be arrogant and unrestrained in the residence. Who knew how many servants had been beaten to death? They didn't want to be the next one. Gao Su threw his whip on the ground and quickly walked to the front yard. "Young master, you're back." A white-haired old man greeted him. He was the head steward of the Gao residence. He was brought over by second madam when she got married, so he was given the name Gao Cheng. He watched Gao Su grow up, so he had an indescribable feeling for Gao Su. "Gao Cheng, where's my father?" Gao Su glanced at Gao Cheng, his expression slightly better. However, Gao Cheng's brows furrowed. He knew that the second young master was usually a dandy, but he treated him well and called him steward. Why did he call him by his real name today? Could it be that this fellow fought with some family's young master again? Did he lose and come back to complain? After some thought, he sighed and said, "Young master, old master is in the backyard." "Then I'll go find him." Gao Su turned around and prepared to walk to the backyard. Chapter 2081. Gao Cheng pulled Gao Shi back and dissuaded him. "Young master, master doesn't like to be disturbed in the backyard. Why don't you wait for a moment?" "How can I do that?" Gao Su's face was full of astonishment. His eyes widened as he said, "I have an important matter to discuss with father. Mother ***, I was almost beaten by a brat today. I must get justice for father." As expected, Gao Cheng secretly said in his heart, "Young master really fought with someone else. Young master is too restless. He fights with others every day. Last time he just beat up someone from the Wang family. This time he beat up someone else? I wonder who he beat up this time?" Last time, the Wang family was fine. He was just a lonely noble. Just give him some money and suppress him with force. This time, if he beat up that young master, it wouldn't be easy to clean up the mess. After thinking about it, he turned to look at Gao Shi. "Young master, you go to the hall first. I'll go to the backyard and call master over." Gao Su originally wanted to go directly to the backyard to find his father and smear some mud on the way, pretending that he had been beaten up. With his father's doting personality, he would definitely kill that brat surnamed Zhang. But now, it seemed that it was better to lie down in the hall and pretend to be seriously injured. Thinking about it, he nodded and said happily, "Okay, Uncle Cheng, quickly go and inform father. I'll lie down in the hall first. Remember, you must say that I'm seriously injured and can't get up." Gao Cheng let out a bitter laugh. Young master's temperament really didn't change at all. Just now he called him Gao Cheng. Now he called him Uncle Cheng? And he wanted to lie down in the hall and pretend to be seriously injured? However, he had watched Gao Shi grow up. No matter what kind of rude request he made, he would agree to it. So he could only turn and walk to the backyard. Gao Shi grabbed some mud and smeared it on his face. He even deliberately tore his clothes and lay down in the hall, thinking about what he would say when father came. On the other side, Gao Cheng had already reached the backyard. Countless exotic flowers and herbs were planted here, and there were even quite a few precious species. Many of them were species that even the imperial palace did not have. A middle-aged man stood in the middle of the flowers. He had a high bun on his hair, and the hair on his temples were graying. There were obvious wrinkles on his face, and his turbid eyes were half squinted, as if he was sensing the aura of the flowers. He was the head of the Gao family, Gao Xian. Master, second young master is back, Gao Cheng said from behind. Gao Xian frowned, obviously dissatisfied. He didn't like others to disturb him at this time, but when he heard that it was his son, his frown relaxed a little. It's fine that you're back, but do you have to report to me? Don't you know that I don't like to be disturbed? Gao Cheng was slightly stunned and immediately said, Master, I didn't mean to disturb you, but it's... Young master. Vow? Gao Xian frowned. She turned her head slightly and asked, What's wrong? Young master fought with someone again. This time, it seems that his injuries are not light. Gao Cheng lowered his head and said worriedly. He knew that master usually doted on second young master the most, but at the same time he hated it when second young master went out to fight. That was because master only had 2 sons, and there were only 2 successors in the big Gao family. If anything happened to second young master, the heavy responsibility of reviving the family would be left to eldest young master alone. This was very disadvantageous for a big family. Sure enough, when Gao Xian heard Gao Cheng's report, he frowned and shouted angrily, Who dares to hit my Gao family's disciple? And how is that unfilial son now? Gao Cheng hurriedly lowered his head and said softly, Young master is lying in the hall now. We don't know who hit him yet. As soon as he finished speaking, Gao Xian waved his sleeves and walked towards the hall. Seeing this, Gao Cheng hurriedly followed behind. In the hall, Val was lying on the ground, purposely moaning in pain, trying to confuse his father who was about to arrive. Ouch! It hurts! A series of cries entered Gao Xian's ears. His heart skipped a beat, and he quickened his steps. As soon as he entered the door, he saw his most beloved son sitting on the ground. His whole body was covered in mud, and his clothes were torn. This was definitely a beating, and not a light one at that. He hurriedly went forward and asked with a face full of concern, Who or what's going on? Who did you fight with? When Val saw that his father had come, it was as if he had found someone to vent all the grievances he had suffered. Tears streamed down his face, and he said while crying, Father, it was an unknown boy. I was riding a horse on the street, and that bastard blocked my horse and let the servants hit me. Father, you have to help me. Hearing his son's crying, Gao Xian frowned. He faintly felt that something was wrong. With the Gao family's status in Jiangnan, not to mention an unknown boy, even the other 4 big families did not dare to touch the Gao family, let alone the Gao family's young master. How could a boy dare to hit the Gao family's young master? There was something strange about this. Could it be an outsider? But an outsider should have heard of the Jiangnan Gao family, right? Chapter 2082. After all, the Gao family was backed by the Lu family. Who dared to provoke them? However, there was someone who dared to touch the Gao family, and even made an oath. He couldn't care so much now. Even if it was a branch of the other 5 families, he had to tear off a piece of skin for beating his son. Thinking about it, he turned his head and glanced at the steward Gao Cheng and said fiercely, Gao Cheng, immediately send someone to find that kid and then come back to the residence. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. A vicious look flashed in Gao Su's eyes. He quickly said, Steward, my men have already followed that kid. You can ask them and they'll find him. He couldn't wait anymore. He couldn't wait to trample on that reckless kid. However, at this moment, a mocking voice came from outside. You still have the face to go home after being beaten? Gao Su's eyes narrowed. He had a bad feeling. This was because he knew that this was his big brother, the young master of the Gao family, Gao Ming. This guy had been smart since he was young. He was familiar with the classics and history, and was deeply doted on by his father. He heard that his father wanted to make this guy the heir of the Gao family. However, he knew that his father liked him at the same time, so he didn't make this guy. It seemed that he was preparing to think about it. He wasn't worried that the heir would fall into his big brother's hands. This was because his mother was deeply doted on by his father, and that big brother's mother had already fallen out of favor. Therefore, this big brother was now just a decoration in his eyes. He responded rudely. Gao Ming, what do you mean? As soon as his voice fell, a young man with a folding fan in his hand walked out from the side of the door. This young man had a delicate face with distinct features. In particular, his white clothes made him look fresh and refined. However, there was a hint of coldness in the corner of his eyes, giving people a very gloomy feeling. Second brother, I'm your big brother. It's not good to call my real name like this, right? Gao Ming waved his folding fan, and the corner of his mouth outlined an indescribable smile. What's not good about it? Gao Shi snorted and curled his lips. Didn't you just mock me? Gao Ming was about to speak, but Gao Xian waved his hand and interrupted. All right, you two are brothers. What can't be solved? Why must you quarrel? These words left Gao Lu speechless. He originally wanted to ridicule Gao Lu, but he had no choice but to stop. However, Gao Su was unwilling to let it go. He tugged at Gao Xian's sleeve and begged. Father, I was beaten up. Big brother is still mocking me. You should punish him. And that brat, you have to avenge me. All right. Gao Xian flicked her sleeves impatiently and turned to look at Gao Cheng, who was standing by outside the door. Gao Cheng, send someone to capture him immediately. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. Gao Cheng nodded and turned around to leave. But at that moment, Gao Ming took a step forward. Father, wait. I think there's something fishy about this. When he thought about it, he couldn't stand this younger brother of his. It was fine that he usually acted like a tyrant at home, but he even ran to the streets to fight. Last time, the family had spent a lot of money to clean up this brat's mess, and this time he was here again? Another reason was that his father had never announced his successor. He was very worried that the successor would fall on this useless younger brother of his. After all, his mother was no longer favored. If that vixen from the second branch was blowing pillow talk, this would obviously be ruined. Of course, there was another important reason for him to go forward. That was he could see that Gao Su's injuries were fake. With this reason, he was even more fearless. Thus, he pointed at Gao Su and said sternly, Father, second brother's injuries are fake. There must be something strange about it. Hearing this, Gao Su's heart thumped. He thought to himself, how did big brother see through it? I've been hiding it very well. If father finds out that I'm faking it, will he not catch that brat? Thinking of this, he turned to look at Gao Xian. Gao Xian was as calm as usual because he had long seen that his son was faking it. But what could he do? Something like this had happened before. This brat had pretended to be dead. This time, if he didn't follow his request, he would probably have to lie in bed for 17 or 18 days. The Gao family was big, and he only had 2 sons. What could he do if he didn't pamper them? Now that his eldest son had exposed his second son, he could only play the peacemaker. Ming, even if you can see through it, there's no need to say it. You don't know Gao Er's personality. With that, he turned and sat upright on the chair, as if relieved of a burden. Gao Su also finally breathed a sigh of relief because his father wasn't angry. But his father didn't seem to have said anything about revenge. He hurriedly got up and half knelt at Gao Xian's feet, pleading, Father, you must avenge me. Gao Xian had thought that his son was lying on the ground to put on an act. Maybe he had beaten up some family's young master or bullied someone. Now that he looked at it, he was afraid that wasn't the case. He knew his son too well. Normally, he wouldn't tear his clothes apart because of this, unless he was beaten up by someone. After all, they all had the 5 surnames and 7 hopes standing behind them. Since he was not a young master of the clan, there was only one possibility. Foreigners? A foreign young master? As he thought about it, he turned to look at Gao Xian. Father, there's usually no one in Jiangnan who dares to go against us. The other 6 forces shouldn't be so stupid either. After all, we're in a cooperative relationship now. Do you think there could be outsiders? Gao Xian nodded as if he agreed with his son's words. But suddenly he seemed to have thought of something. He narrowed his eyes and said, Ming, or do you think it could be that hidden power? Gao Ming frowned, obviously thinking about something. After a while he said, Father, it shouldn't be. After all, that hidden power is not as strong as our 7 families. They wouldn't dare to provoke our Gao family so brazenly. Gao Xian nodded slightly and said to himself, Then who could it be? Who could have so many people in Jiangnan? As he spoke, he turned to look at Gao Yu at his feet. Gao Yu, did the person who came leave his name? His name is... Gao Yu raised his head and thought for a while. Suddenly he shouted, I remember, that person is called Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng? Gao Xian frowned. He was thinking about who this person was. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. He slammed the table and stood up. He said sternly, That person is Zhang Feng? Gao Yu, are you sure you didn't hear wrong? He had heard of this guy's name in Chang'an before. It was rumored that he had founded an academy at a young age, and had Yu Shinan and the others as his teachers. He studied military counselors, life and so on. He had endless means. The most terrifying thing was that this guy was the public enemy of the 5 families and 7 kingdoms. Think about it. How powerful must this guy be to attract the attention of the 5 families and 7 kingdoms? He had heard that this guy was coming to Jiangnan. As a branch of the Lu family, he had naturally sent people to inquire about it. But there was no news on the way. How could he have expected that he would suddenly appear here and fight with his son? This was obviously not a good sign. It was not because he was afraid of Zhang Feng, but because he was cautious as the head of the family. This guy had been very famous in Chang'an before. This time, he must have come to Jiangnan prepared. If he attacked rashly, he might not be able to get anything good. Gao Yu didn't know about this. He asked with a startled face, Father, what's wrong with you? Why are you so nervous about a Zhang? Chapter 2084. In his impression, his father was someone who would remain calm even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him. Now he became like this after hearing a kid's name? Could it be that this kid had a strong background? Or was it the young master of the clan? Could it be that he could not take revenge? Gao Xian was not in the mood to pay attention to him. Instead, he turned to Gao Ming and said solemnly, Ming, I've told you about Zhang Feng before. Do you still remember? Gao Ming nodded. He remembered that his father had said that Zhang Feng was a famous talent in Chang'an. Although he had no parents, he had a group of friends and relatives. All of them had extraordinary status, especially the group of businessmen. It was as if they could cover the sky with one hand. Back then, Madame Lu had sent people to investigate, but there was no news. The only thing they knew was that this group of businessmen was very rich, and that was all. And Zhang Feng, with the help of this group of businessmen, slowly rose from a small tavern to a noble title in the imperial court. He even opened an academy, made weapons, and produced necessities. In short, as long as it was something that could not be found in the world, this guy seemed to be able to do it. Even Jiangnan would sell some of Zhang Feng's goods, such as braised meat, rubber, food, and so on. For a moment, he even wanted to get to know this guy and see what kind of person the people of Chang'an, worshipped as a god, was. However, he knew that he could not. This guy was the enemy of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. If he got to know him, he would undoubtedly be digging his own grave. At the same time, he also felt sorry for Zhang Feng. What kind of people could he offend? Why did he have to offend the 5 surnames and 7 hopes? Wasn't this courting death? A talent was going to fall. While daydreaming, he turned to look at Gao Xian and said solemnly, Father, you've told me about this Zhang Feng before. I've also studied him. He is indeed quite talented, but he is a bit arrogant and conceited. He dares to make enemies with the 5 surnames and 7 hopes? I'm afraid he's someone who can't see the situation clearly. Gao Xian nodded. He felt the same way. After all, the 5 surnames and 7 hopes were famous families. Even if Zhang Feng was more powerful, what could he do? Could he still shake the 7 great families? However, since this guy dared to come to Jiangnan, he must have made preparations. It was better not to confront him head-on. After thinking about it, he looked at Gao Ming. Ming, what do you think? Gao Ming slightly furrowed his brows and said, Father, I don't think it's the right time to confront Zhang Feng. We should figure out his purpose. Firstly, he didn't want to avenge Gao Jian. Secondly, he didn't know Zhang Feng's power at all. If he acted rashly, he would definitely be at a disadvantage, so it was better to wait. Thirdly, he wanted to see this mysterious person, and see if he was really as powerful as the rumors said. If it was true, maybe he could take him in and make plans for the future. Of course, these were all his own thoughts. But Gao Hu, who was at the side, didn't agree. He jumped 8 feet high, pointed at Gao Ming angrily, and said fiercely, What do you mean? Could it be that you don't want me to take revenge? Lao Tzu is your brother, and this is how you treat me? Younger brother? Gao Ming sneered. He thought to himself, Do you think you're worthy? But because his father was here, he couldn't go too far. He could only say, Second brother, that Zhang Feng didn't hit you, right? Besides, we haven't figured out his purpose. How do you want to do it? Do you want to be beaten by him? You. Gao Hu's eyes were red, and the veins could be faintly seen. He was very dissatisfied with his big brother's attitude, especially this sneer, which made him feel a chill. Just as he was about to curse, Gao Xian couldn't stand it anymore. He only had 2 sons, and he thought that both of them were talented. But the eldest son was talented, and the second son had developed a playboy temperament. Usually he couldn't hit or scold him, and the 2 of them were like fire and water. Today, they were quarreling because of an outsider? He sternly scolded. Enough, both of you, shut up. As his voice fell, Gao Hu was slightly stunned. Then he glared fiercely at Gao Ming before letting it go. Gao Ming, on the other hand, looked indifferent because he understood his father's temperament. Although he doted on his second son, he wouldn't absolutely indulge him. Sure enough, Gao Xian glanced at his 2 sons, and finally his gaze fell on Gao Hu. He said with a loving face, Gao Hu, put your personal grudges aside first. Wait until I investigate Zhang Feng's forces in Jiangnan. Then I will avenge you. Gao Hu's heart skipped a beat. He was about to plead, but he saw Gao Xian looking at Gao Ming again, and said with a serious face, Ming, I'll leave the investigation of Zhang Feng to you. You must investigate Zhang Feng's forces in Jiangnan. Also, inform the other 6 families of Zhang Feng's arrival in Jiangnan. Let them know as well. Yes, father. Gao Ming folded his fan and cupped his hands. Then, as if he thought of something, he asked, Father, it's not good to tell the other 6 families about Zhang Feng, right? Oh. Gao Xian raised his eyebrows and asked with a little doubt, Ming, do you have any objections? Chapter 2085. Gao Ming nodded and said solemnly, Father, although the other 6 families seem to be cooperating with us on the surface, they all have their own ulterior motives. Everyone wants to gain more benefits, and even want to squeeze the other families dry of their money. Zhang Feng's arrival might be able to break this situation. If we don't talk about Zhang Feng, who knows if that family will fight with Zhang Feng one day, and we can profit from it. Even if Zhang Feng suffers losses, we won't lose out. Gao Xian's body trembled. He realized that he had to reevaluate this son of his. He didn't realize that his son was so scheming before. This time he was so good at hiding Zhang Feng's whereabouts. If he bumped into the heads of the other 6 families, then the Gao family would be the fishermen. Thinking about this, he smiled with satisfaction. Ming, you're right. We'll do as you say. However, we still need to know Zhang Feng's whereabouts. Gao Ming nodded and his lips curled into an evil smile. Father, don't worry. Leave this to me. I'll make sure that Zhang Feng won't be able to escape from the Gao family. Saying this, he waved his fan and turned to walk towards the front yard. As soon as he left, he heard a burst of unbridled laughter. Gao Ming felt that it was ear-piercing and secretly spat. He turned to look at Gao Xian. Father, look at big brother. He clearly doesn't put you in his eyes. He's too presumptuous. Gao Xian didn't answer. Instead, he raised his head and glanced at Gao Ming, who was walking away. His eyes flashed with worry. The reason why he didn't make Gao Ming the successor of the Gao family was because this guy was sometimes too vicious. He didn't leave any leeway when doing things. He was smart enough to be the head of the family, but he was worried that the head of the family would make a move on his brother. This was the reason why he didn't make a successor for a long time. At the same time, Zhang Feng also found traces of Jia Daoren. He was in a manor. This manor wasn't very big, but it wasn't small either. It belonged to the middle class and was enough to accommodate everyone. Now, everyone was sitting in the main hall and discussing what to do next. Zhang Feng glanced at everyone and then looked at Jia Daoren. Old Jia, tell me about the current situation in Jiangnan. The more detailed, the better. Jia Daoren nodded and said, Jiangnan now has 8 major powers. The 8 major powers? Zhang Feng frowned slightly. Didn't he hear about the 7 great forces on the street just now? He asked with a puzzled expression. Old merchant, I heard that there are only 7 major forces on the streets. Why are you saying that there are 8 major forces? 7 great powers? Jia Daoren's face was filled with question marks. He turned to look at Zhang Feng and asked, Master, who did you hear this from? The Dang family belongs to the branch of the Li family in Longxi. Chapter 2087. Fortunately, he brought some guards with him this time. If he faced these gangsters, he would have some confidence. However, these people seemed to be a little small. He turned to look at Jia Daoren and said solemnly, Old Jia, do you have any way to recruit some people to serve as guards? Otherwise, I'm afraid the 50 people I brought are a little small. Jia Daoren smiled and said, Master, you don't have to worry about this. I've been in Jiangnan for so long. Naturally, I've bought some people. Although there aren't many, there are more than 300 people. The guards are enough. Zhang Feng looked at Jia Daoren in surprise. He didn't expect this old guy to have a trick up his sleeve. He couldn't help but look at him in a new light. Old Jia, you've done well. Including the 300 people under you, we can be considered a big force now. As he spoke, he seemed to think of something and frowned. How is you now? As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Yuyao and Jingshu looked at each other, and then looked at Jia Daoren. Although they had accepted Yu, Prince Zhang came to Jiangnan to find her this time. It made the 2 girls a little uncomfortable. Later, when they heard that she was in danger, they couldn't help but worry about her. They didn't know what they were thinking now. Were they worried about Yu, or were they jealous? While they were daydreaming, Jia Daoren said, Master, Miss Yuer's situation is not very good now. Many young masters of the 7 families have come to propose marriage, but they were all rejected by the Yu family. This made those young masters very angry. They used their family's power and began to restrict the Yu family's business. Now many of the Yu family's businesses are restricted by the 7 families. Most of them can't be sold. Zhang Feng frowned. He didn't expect Yuer's situation to be so bad. But the good thing was that her life was not in danger. Now he could only help Yu, or get out of this predicament as soon as possible. Thinking of this, he turned to look at Jia Daoren. What business of Yuer's family is restricted? It's rice paper. Jia Daoren frowned. Rice paper? Zhang Feng was delighted. When he came over this time, he brought some paper with him. The quality was much higher than Xian paper. It was made in the paper factory back then. If he could open up the market in Jiangnan, he would not have to worry about Yuer's family being restricted. He smiled and said, Old merchant, send someone to buy a few houses later. We'll start attacking the market tomorrow. Master Yu. Jia Daoren looked at Zhang Feng in confusion. Do you also want to sell rice paper? Zhang Feng shook his head. I'm not selling Xian paper. I have paper better than Xian paper in my hands. You've been in Chang'an all this time, so you might not know. When I was in Chang'an, I already made paper better than Xian paper. It's just that I didn't sell it to Chang'an. Better paper than rice paper? Jia Daoren frowned in disbelief. One had to know that Xian paper was a high-end paper product used by many nobles. Even the emperor used Xian paper. The scholars of the world even crowned Xian paper as the #1 paper in the world. How could there be other papers that could surpass Xian paper? Zhang Feng saw Jia Daoren's look of disbelief and waved to the guard at the door. The guard understood, turned around and ran away. Not long after, sheets of white and flawless paper were laid out in front of Jia Daoren. This. Jia Daoren looked at the paper in front of him, and his pupils constricted. He stuttered. What paper is this? Why is it so white? As he spoke, he could not help but touch the white paper. His body suddenly trembled. This paper is actually smoother than Xian paper? Zhang Feng smiled and grabbed a piece of white paper. This is the paper I told you about. How does it compare to Xian paper? This is simply much better than Xian paper. Jia Daoren did not even think and directly answered. His face was red as he said, if this were to be sold in the world, it would definitely attract the attention of scholars. Master, how much of this paper do you have now? Zhang Feng did not directly answer. Instead he frowned. Not a lot, but it should be enough to sell for 2 or 3 days. 2 or 3 days? Jia Daoren's brows were almost knitted into a line. Master, 2 or 3 days is not enough. You don't know how crazy the scholars in Chang'an are. Once there is something good, they will buy it even if they have to go bankrupt. I'm afraid that your things will be sold out in a day. Zhang Feng raised his head and thought for a while. Then he said, it's okay. Open the shop first and put out the paper signboard. I will immediately write a letter to Chang, and to send the paper over. It seems like this is the only way. Jia Daoren's face was sad. But Chang'an is so far away from Chang'an. Even if you ride a horse at full speed, I'm afraid it will take 7 days? Zhang Feng waved his hand and did not mind. It doesn't matter if it takes longer. First, establish the market. In the future, if the results are good, we will open a paper factory in Chang'an. Then we won't have to ship goods over from Chang'an. Jia Daoren nodded. Master, then I will go and arrange the shop. As he spoke, he stood up and walked out of the door. His steps were very fast. He walked to the door like a gust of wind. If he was slower, he would definitely be able to see the black shadow behind the door. Chapter 2088. Seeing that the people in the house were gradually dispersing, the black shadow took a deep look at Zhang Feng and flipped over the courtyard wall like a carp. Crossing the street, the black shadow's footsteps became faster. After about half an hour, he stopped at the back door of a mansion. At this time, if someone raised their head to look, they would see 2 large words written on the plaque above the door, Gao Mansion. The black shadow did not linger and gently pushed the door. As if there was someone inside to receive him, the door was opened. The black shadow jumped and ran directly to a brightly lit house. After pushing open the door, the black shadow half knelt at the threshold. Young master. A young man sat inside, holding a folding fan in his hand and looking down at the game of Go. He was elegant. It was Gao Ming from this morning. He put down the chess piece, glanced at the black shadow, and said lightly, "Come here." Hearing this, the black shadow raised his head and glanced at the door. Seeing that there was no one, he walked forward. "Young master, I've found out everything." Gao Ming was obviously interested. He closed his folding fan and said with a serious face, "Is that Zhang Feng as powerful as the rumors say? How does he look? Also, why did he come to Chang'an?" The black shadow cupped his hands and said in a low voice, "Young master, that Zhang Feng looks like an ordinary person and is quite handsome. As for his purpose, it seems to be for a woman." "A woman?" Gao Ming frowned. He had heard that Zhang Feng was a very rich man and had an official title in the imperial court. His business was also very big. How could such a person come to Chang'an to take risks for a woman? But on second thought, this Zhang Feng seemed to be a scholar. Since ancient times, scholars were affectionate. It was possible that he would do something for a woman. Thinking about it, he could only ask, "Have you found out who Zhang Feng's woman is?" The black shadow frowned and paused for a long time before saying, "I only heard this Zhang Feng say that the woman is called Yuer. I don't know anything else." "You?" Gao Ming frowned. In Jiangnan, there were many women called Yuer. How would he know who it was? However, a person like Zhang Feng wouldn't take a fancy to some common cosmetics, right? She should be from some noble family, right? He began to ponder. Suddenly, he thought of something. Yuchi Yuer? Could it be her? Yuchi Yuer had always been in Jiangnan and rarely went out. She basically had no chance to get to know Zhang Feng. Could it be the Zhao clan's Yuer? If it was a girl from the Zhao family, Zhang Feng wouldn't be easy to deal with. No, he had to make a trip to the Zhao clan in a few days to clarify this matter, so that the Zhao clan wouldn't misunderstand. After all, the Li family of Longxi stood behind the Zhao family, which was a royal bloodline. It was not easy to provoke them. After thinking for a while, he looked at the black shadow and continued to ask, "Did Zhang Feng say what he plans to do next?" The shadow nodded. Zhang Feng said he wants to buy paper, and this paper is better than Xian paper. Gao Ming frowned, feeling that something was wrong. Xian paper was recognized as the best paper in the world. How could Zhang Feng have the guts to say that it was better than Xian paper? Could it be that this guy wanted to play to the gallery? It shouldn't be. Moreover, a person who ran such a big business shouldn't be so stupid. Could it be that this guy really had better paper than Xian paper? For a moment, he was a little suspicious. Did you hear wrongly just now? Did Zhang Feng really say that it's better than Xian paper? The black shadow nodded solemnly. This time, Gao Ming was even more confused. He knew that the guy in front of him wouldn't lie to him. However, he couldn't believe that Zhang Feng had better paper than Xian paper. Combined with the information he knew about Zhang Feng, he also knew that the other party was not stupid. He probably wouldn't do anything stupid, so there was only one possibility. This guy really had something. Thinking of this, he looked at the shadow and said solemnly, "Do you know when he'll start selling?" "Tomorrow," the shadow said firmly. "Good." Gao Ming slapped the table and narrowed his eyes. Since this guy is going to sell tomorrow, tonight is the time to do it. You immediately inform all the businesses that they are not allowed to sell their houses to Zhang Feng. Otherwise, they will be going against my Gao family. The shadow nodded, turned around and ran out of the door. Suddenly, the room became much quieter. After a long time, Gao Ming glanced outside the door and sneered. "Zhang Feng, although I haven't seen you yet, the war between us has started. I was very happy that you made a vow, but when I heard that you want to deal with the 7 families, I can't sit back and do nothing. This time, I want to see how powerful this rumored person is." The sneer was especially arrogant and breathtaking, floating in the entire room. This night seemed to be unusually noisy. The doors of many shops on the street were knocked on. First, they were stopped by a group of black-clothed men to warn them. Some of them were stubborn and didn't want to agree to anything, so they were beaten up. In the end, they still agreed to some conditions. The black-clothed men didn't leave until all the shops on the street were knocked on. Then, they were greeted with waves of abuse. However, these abuses were like mosquitoes. They seemed to be afraid of something. Chapter 2089. Soon, the night passed and the sun rose high in the sky. Zhang Feng stretched his body and walked out of the room. Just as he was about to eat breakfast, something bumped into him. "Damn it, who doesn't have eyes?" He cursed and was about to teach the person a lesson when he realized it was Yu Baoqing. He was even angrier. "Baoqing, are you King blind? Watch where you're going." Yuchi Baoqing scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "I'm sorry, Fengzi. I wasn't paying attention." As he spoke, he seemed to remember something and his expression changed. "Fengzi, something happened. Old Jia and the others are waiting for you in the hall." Zhang Feng frowned and felt that something was wrong. He turned and walked toward the hall. As soon as he entered, Jia Daoren came up to him. "Master, something happened. I went out to buy a house this morning, but no one was willing to buy." "How could this be?" Zhang Feng's expression darkened. I don't know. Jia Daoren frowned and paced around. I saw that no one was buying and thought that I was underpaying. I doubled the price, but no one was willing to buy. Master, what should I do? Don't panic. Zhang Feng waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to panic. Then he seemed to think of something and quickly said, Old Jia, did you offend someone in Jiangnan? Otherwise, why didn't they buy? How could I have offended someone? Jia Daoren said without hesitation. Then he paused and said, Master, even if I did offend someone, they wouldn't be a threat. It's impossible that so many merchants wouldn't buy. Zhang Feng took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, even if old Jia had offended someone, he couldn't have controlled all the merchants immediately. Besides, why was it that old Jia was fine before, but now the merchants were unified? There was only one possibility left. It had something to do with him? Did he offend someone? That was impossible. He had just arrived in Jiangnan and hadn't had time. Oh no, it was the Gao family. He finally figured it out and quickly said, Old Jia, it must be the Gao family. The Gao clan? Jia Daoren glanced in the direction of the Gao residence and felt that it wasn't quite possible. He asked, Even if you offended the Gao family, they wouldn't know about our relationship. Moreover, we only discussed buying paper yesterday. How would they know? Zhang Feng nodded, thinking that it made sense. But soon he came to his senses. The Gao family was powerful, so wouldn't it be easy for them to find her? Besides, the guards had been on the road all night yesterday. Perhaps they had let down their guard and let these dogs slip in? All of these were possible. However, it was no longer important to know this now. With a heavy expression he asked, Old merchant, is there any other way to buy a house? Jia Daoren shook his head. I'm afraid not anymore. Once the Gao family gets involved, no one else will dare to buy a house unless... Unless what? A glimmer of hope flashed across Zhang Feng's face. Jia Daoren looked deeply at Zhang Feng with a heavy expression. Unless you look for the Yang family. Only they would dare to go against the Gao family. Zhang Feng frowned. Although he wanted to build a good relationship with the Yang family, he didn't plan to look for them. Just as he was about to ask if there was any other way, Jia Daoren spoke again. Apart from the Yang family, there are only the other 6 families, Zhang Feng sighed. Wasn't that the same as not saying anything? The 7 families all wore the same pants. How could they go against the Gao family? They might as well look for the Yang family. That was what he thought, but he didn't plan to do so yet. He remembered that the old scholar had given him a slip of paper with some important information written on it. He looked at Jia Daoren and asked seriously, Old merchant, do you know the Wang family? The Wang family? Jia Daoren frowned. He raised his head as if he was thinking about something. After a while he said, There aren't many Wangs in Jiangnan. Master, are you talking about the Wang family by the canal? Zhang Feng nodded. That's the Wang family. What kind of power do they belong to? What is their position in Jiangnan? Jia Daoren shook his head and sighed. The Wang family is quite pitiful. They were aristocrats in the Sui dynasty and were prominent in Jiangnan for a period of time. They basically monopolized 1/10 of Jiangnan's industry until His Majesty ascended to the throne. The Wang family's power slowly declined and was swallowed up by the 7 families. Now they only have one industry left. I'm not sure what it is exactly. As for their power, they seem to have joined the Yang family. However, this happened a while ago, so the Wang family's power isn't very strong. Master, do you know the Wang family? Zhang Feng nodded slightly. Previously, an elder told me to look for the Wang family if I were in trouble. I didn't expect the Wang family to be in such dire straits. However, it seems that there is no other way. After thinking for a while, he seemed to have made a decision. Prepare the horse. Since I'm already in Jiangnan, I'll go take a look. Even if I can't help much, I'll just take it as a junior going to visit the elders. Chapter 2090. The Wang family was acquainted with the old scholar, so it was only right for him to address him as an elder. Seeing that Zhang Feng had made his decision, Jia Daoren did not say anything more. He nodded and said, Master, how many people are you going to bring? After all, this is Jiangnan, so we have to be careful. Zhang Feng glanced at the guards and asked hesitantly, "Where are Gao Can, Hao Chujun and the others?" "They all went out to look for a house. When Gao Can heard that no one would buy it for us, he almost went to the county office. If Hao Chujun had not stopped him, the county office would have been in a mess." Jia Daoren thought of what had just happened and smiled bitterly. That old man is too dishonest, and he even wants Chujun. What's the use of going to the county office for this kind of thing? He's brainless. Zhang Feng couldn't help but curse inwardly. After letting out a long breath, he turned to Yu Baoqing and said, "Baoqing, take 10 guards with you and come with me." Yu Baoqing nodded and went to the yard to get the guards. "Master, will 10 people be enough?" Jia Daoren asked worriedly. "What are you afraid of?" Zhang Feng waved his hand and said carelessly, "Gao Can still has the commander's seal. Although he can't mobilize the troops, it's enough to keep Jiangnan under control. Who dares to touch me? Let's go." With that, he turned and walked out of the door. He boarded the carriage and drove to the canal street. After a while, the horse neighed and the carriage slowly came to a stop. "Fengzi, we've arrived at the place you said." Yuqi Baoqing's voice came from outside the carriage. Zhang Feng answered casually and stepped out of the carriage. As soon as he got out, he saw a huge mansion. Although the mansion was big, it was slightly dilapidated. There were obvious cracks on the stone lion at the door, and the paint on the pillars had fallen off because of old age. There were even obvious marks on the door. At first glance, it looked like a down-and-out mansion. If Zhang Feng had not seen the huge plaque with the words Prince's Mansion written on it, he would have suspected that he had come to the wrong place. "Baoqing, are you sure we're not at the wrong place?" Zhang Feng looked at the plaque and asked suspiciously. Yuqi Baoqing scratched his head and smiled awkwardly. "Fengzi, I came here according to the address you gave me. What's wrong with that?" Zhang Feng let out a long sigh. It seemed that he had overestimated the prince's mansion. Such a dilapidated mansion. He was afraid that it had been built for a long time. "Let's go in and take a look." He waved his hand, gesturing for them to enter. As he spoke, he strode towards the manor. As soon as he stepped on the stairs, a shout came. "Who's there? Stop!" Zhang Feng was stunned. He stopped and took a closer look. It turned out that 2 men dressed in servants' clothing had rushed out. He smiled and said, "I'm here to pay a visit to your master." "Pay a visit to master?" The 2 servants looked at each other. The leader stepped forward and asked in surprise, "Which family are you from? What business do you have with my master?" Zhang Feng could not help but smile bitterly. Wasn't this servant too cautious? It seemed that he was often bullied by the clan. He smiled and expressed his goodwill. "I'm an old friend of your master. You can go ahead and report that Mr. Zihuai asked me to come." The leader of the servants narrowed his eyes and carefully examined Zhang Feng. Then he turned to the other servant and whispered something to him. Then he rushed into the manor. After about half an hour, the servant walked out. However, he was no longer as cautious as before. He was full of smiles. "So it's an esteemed guest. I didn't know that I had offended you. I'm really sorry. Please follow me." Zhang Feng smiled and did not intend to make a fuss. After all, the Wang clan was already in dire straits. It was not wrong to be cautious. He waved his hand and indicated for Yuqi Baolin to follow closely behind him. Then he followed the servant into the manor. As soon as he entered, he saw a large pond. There were many koi fish and lotus flowers in the pond. There were many fake mountains above the pond. In addition to some flowing water, it was like a landscape painting. It could be seen that the owner of this manor was a person who cultivated his character. Walking further in, there was a long corridor with dozens of pillars standing in great numbers. There were many flowers, birds, fish, and insects carved on them. However, the exquisite carvings had been eroded by time. Many of the lifelike animals could no longer be seen clearly. After passing through the corridor, a large hall came into view. The pillars supporting the hall were the same as the pillars in the corridor. They were dilapidated. "Young master, my master is in the hall. Please enter on your own. I'll go make tea for you." The servant bowed and said. Zhang Feng did not reply. He only nodded slightly. Then he strode into the hall. The hall looked very spacious. It was even larger than the Zhang manor. However, it was empty. There were many tables with flowers, porcelain, and other decorations. There was even some light dust on them. Chapter 2091. It wasn't hard to imagine how grand the Wang residence used to be, but now it was deserted. Zhang Feng looked around and saw two figures by the window. One seemed to be a man, sitting cross-legged, and the other was a servant girl, standing respectfully at the side. Seeing this, he hurried forward. "May I ask if you are the Wang residence's old master, Wang Shi?" As he spoke, he glanced at the man and saw that he was about 40 years old. He had a long hair bun, and his face was full of wrinkles. He looked kind, but his eyes were tightly closed, making him look mysterious. He was wearing a discolored brocade robe. It must have changed color because it had been washed many times. After a moment, the man lazily opened his eyes and glanced at Zhang Feng. "Who are you? Why do you say you know Zihuai? What are your intentions in coming to the Wang residence?" Zhang Feng smiled bitterly. After all this time, the old man was still suspicious of him? He was too damn cautious. Just how badly had he been harmed? He shook his head and smiled. "Master Wang, my name is Zhang Feng. I am half a disciple of Master Zihuai. As for coming to the Wang residence, it was on Master Zihuai's orders to pay a visit." As he spoke, he waved at Yuqi Baoqing, indicating for him to bring the gift. The old man was too wary now. It was better to build a good relationship with him first before asking for help. Besides, the old man still didn't believe that he was Master Zihuai's disciple. Perhaps the gift would lower his guard. This method seemed to have some effect. The servant girl opened the gift box and placed it in front of the old man. The old man glanced at it, and a glint flashed in his eyes. However, it quickly disappeared. He smiled faintly. The things you gave were worthless things in the old man's eyes. They were not presentable at all. Zhang Feng rubbed his nose and smiled awkwardly. He knew that the Wang residence used to belong to the first-class nobility. However, now that it had fallen, he still wanted to take advantage of it. Just as he was about to reply, the old man spoke. "Little child, for the sake of your gift, this old man will temporarily believe that you are Zihuai's disciple. First, tell me what Zihuai looks like. Also, do you have any proof?" After all this time, he still didn't believe it. Zhang Feng laughed bitterly in his heart, but he still put on a smile on his face. "Mr. Zihuai is now in Chang'an. He's about 50 years old, and his face is full of wrinkles. Oh right, there's also Mr. Zihuai's handwriting here." As he spoke, he took out a piece of paper from his waist and handed it over. The old man's expression changed. He quickly took it and looked at it seriously. She laughed excitedly at first, but then she felt sad. She pinched the note and said sadly, "Zihuai, you didn't listen to me back then. Now sigh." He let out a long sigh. Chapter 2092. Wang Shi nodded with relief. "Although I was lonely in the first half of my life, now I have a good home. Teacher, not bad." While they were talking, the maid came in with a wooden plate. There were all kinds of ingredients on it, including scallions, ginger, dates, orange peel, mint, coarse salt, mutton oil, and so on. Zhang Feng was shocked. When he first came to the Tang dynasty, he drank this kind of thing. Once the tea was boiled and all kinds of ingredients were put in, the taste, it was like going to heaven. Fortunately, green tea had been popularized in Chang'an, but Jiangnan was still using the same method. How could he drink it? While he was worried, he seemed to see a business opportunity. People in Jiangnan love tea. If he sold green tea, would it steal a wave of business? He could also open a tea workshop in Jiangnan. After all, the tea here was famous in the country. While daydreaming, he turned to look at Wang Shi. "Uncle, how's the tea business in Jiangnan? Which family is selling it now?" Wang Shi smiled bitterly. "In the past, my Wang residence also dabbled in the way of tea, but we gave up after our family declined. Now, it's the Wu clan that's selling it. Other clans are also dabbling in it, but the Wu clan's business is the largest." "The Wu family? The branch of the Zheng family in Xinjiang? Zhang Feng's eyes turned, thinking about how to enter the tea business. At this time, a burst of pungent smell came. He frowned. He saw Wang Shi smash the tea bricks, boil them with water, and put in all the ingredients such as scallions, vinegar, ginger, dates, orange peel, mint, coarse salt, mutton oil, and so on. Zhang Feng subconsciously covered his nose, but felt that it was inappropriate. He put down his hand and smiled awkwardly. "Uncle, you." Wang Shi smiled, poured a cup of green liquid and handed it to Zhang Feng. "Nephew, this is Jiangnan's Da Hong Pao after the rain. The old man has been collecting it for more than 10 years. Usually, he is only willing to take out a little of it when guests come. This time, it's specially for you." Zhang Feng took the teacup and smiled. "Thank you for your hospitality, uncle. I'm really flattered." "You're welcome. Come, have some tea." Wang Shi smiled. He picked up the teacup and tasted it carefully. He even let out a faint chuckle as he reminisced about the aftertaste. "This is really good tea." After saying that, he glanced at Zhang Feng. "Hey nephew, why aren't you drinking?" Zhang Feng's face was bitter. He really wanted to say, "How am I supposed to drink this thing?" However, he couldn't say this out loud. He could only pick up the teacup and take a sip. Imitating Wang Shi, he smiled faintly and said, "Good tea. Uncle's tea is truly memorable." When Wang Shi heard this, he seemed to be very satisfied. He stroked his white beard and said, "Nephew, it's not that this old man is bragging, but this Da Hong Pao is something that can't be bought with money." Chapter 2094. First, he reached into the Yang family and took away a large amount of minerals, tea ceremony, salt mining, and other businesses. He also secretly sent people to kill many people in the Yang family. Therefore, the Yang family hates Gao Ming, but they dare not say anything. No one dares to take revenge. In addition, Gao Ming is very scheming and his methods are very vicious. His reputation in Jiangnan isn't good, but the head of the Gao family values him very much. Rumors say that Gao Ming is very likely to be the next head of the Gao family. After all, Gao Yu is just a playboy and can't be compared to Gao Ming. Zhang Feng nodded. He had some understanding of the Gao family. However, he was a little puzzled about Gao Ming. Why did he want to attack him? The conflict between him and Gao Yu should be a good thing for Gao Ming. He asked with some doubts. "Uncle, when I entered the city, I didn't have a conflict with Gao Ming. Instead, I had a conflict with Gao Yu. According to what you said, Gao Ming has a vicious personality. Gao Yu should be a thorn in his side. Why did he come to deal with me?" Wang Shi shook his head. "I'm not sure. According to Gao Ming's personality, it's unlikely that he would interfere. Previously, when his younger brother fought with other family members, he couldn't wait for Gao Yu to be killed, so that he could smoothly take over as the head of the family. This time, I don't know why. Maybe it's for the Gao family's face, or maybe it's because he wants to steal your business." "Steal my business?" Zhang Feng was slightly stunned. His business hadn't come to Jiangnan yet. Wasn't the Gao family's ears too fast? Since he couldn't figure it out, he didn't bother to think about it. He looked at Wang Shi and said, "Uncle, I want to go to the Yang family. I wonder if you can recommend me?" Wang Shi didn't even think about it and said directly, "That's not a problem. After the Wang family fell, we joined the Yang family. Although we don't have much power, we can still say something. Old man will take you there?" As he said that, he slowly got up and waved his hand. "Nephew, the Yang family is an alliance. It's just beside the canal. It's not far from here. Old man will take you there." Zhang Feng was naturally happy. He got up and smiled. "Thank you, uncle." Wang Shi nodded and gestured for Zhang Feng to leave with him. The two of them arrived at the entrance one after the other. Wang Shi pointed at Zhang Feng's carriage with some surprise. "Nephew, is this your carriage?" It wasn't that he hadn't seen a carriage before, he had seen too many. It was just that when he saw Zhang Feng's luxurious carriage, he was a little surprised and doubtful. He was even more certain that Zhang Feng was a rich young master. Zhang Feng helped Wang Shi up and smiled. "Uncle, this is your nephew's car. Get in." Wang Shi nodded and got into the carriage with a smile. "Hiya!" With a loud shout, the carriage drove towards the canal. Even the Yang family had to retreat. "This brat actually dared to offend the Gao family?" he asked in disbelief. "Kid, where did you get the courage to offend the Gao family?" Zhang Feng smiled, and was about to speak when Wang Shi reached out to stop him. "Alliance head, you can't blame my nephew for this. It was the Gao family's second young master who bullied my nephew. He was forced to do so." Yang Gang nodded and had a rough idea. He also knew that the Gao family's second young master had always been arrogant and domineering. He often bullied the people in Jiangnan. It didn't seem strange that he bullied this Zhang brat. However, if he sold the house to this Zhang brat now, it would undoubtedly be going against the Gao family. It didn't seem to be worth the loss. He was a little hesitant. At this moment, Yang Qian came over. "Alliance head, I suggest we don't sell it. This brat offended the Gao family. If we sell the house to him now, we'll undoubtedly be going against the Gao family." Yang Yu also nodded and said, "Alliance head, we're already in a precarious situation. If the Gao family attacks us again, I'm afraid we won't be able to hold on." Yang Gang didn't say anything and only nodded silently. He naturally knew the severity of the situation. Compared to Zhang Feng, the Gao family was the real monster. They couldn't afford to offend them. He seemed to have made a decision in his heart and said resolutely, "Little friend Zhang, I'm afraid the Yang family won't be able to help you much. We don't have enough houses ourselves." As soon as he said that, Wang Shi's expression changed, but he quickly recovered. He said in a low voice, "Three alliance heads, a few days ago, this old man heard that the alliance had a large stockpile of houses. Why are they sold out so quickly?" Yang Gang's face darkened. He said unhappily, "Are you questioning me?" As he spoke, his tone softened. "The houses in the alliance were all sold out a few days ago." Hearing this, Zhang Feng understood. The Yang family still had a large number of houses, but they weren't willing to sell them. The reason was probably because of the Gao family. These guys had been bullied by the Gao family for years and didn't dare to offend them now. Chapter 2098. Gift. Zhang Feng snickered in his heart. These three old fellows are really cunning. Before they revealed their identities, they were still making excuses. Now that their identities were clear, they actually wanted to give him a gift. It was obvious that they were trying to rope him in. However, it was also possible that they were afraid of the power of the seven families and wanted to use him as a shield. In any case, he could not accept this gift. Otherwise, he would owe the Yang family a favor in the future. Thinking about it, he cupped his hands and said, "Alliance Master, I'm new here. I really don't dare to accept this gift. Alliance Masters, please name a price." Yang Gang was stunned. He originally thought that Zhang Feng would happily accept this free house. Who would have thought that he would reject it? This instantly disrupted his entire plan. If Zhang Feng became rich in the future, how could the Yang family still rely on this big tree? He turned to look at Yang Qian and Yang Yu. In fact, they were also a little distressed. They never thought that Zhang Feng would reject them. How would the next step of the plan develop? Helplessly, Yang Qian whispered in Yang Gang's ear, "Big brother, why don't we give him the best house at the lowest price? This way he still owes us a favor?" Yang Gang nodded. This was the only way now. Not only would it make Zhang Feng owe the Yang family a favor, but it would also show the Yang family's sincerity. Thinking about it, he turned to look at Zhang Feng and smiled. Little friend Zhang, since you said so, we won't refuse. We'll sell you 3 houses, all connected together. Each house will be 1,000 strings of coins. What do you think? Zhang Feng frowned. He felt that something was wrong. The houses in Chang'an were more expensive. Were the houses in Jiangnan so cheap? 1,000 strings of coins could buy a house. Moreover, the location of the Yang family's houses should not be too bad. Even with the 7 families, there should still be some good houses. Even the worst house in Jiangnan might not be worth this much, right? He turned to Wang Shi and asked softly, Uncle, what's the price? Wang Shi also sensed Zhang Feng's confusion and quietly explained. The worst property in Jiangnan costs 2,000 strings of coins. This Yang house can't be the worst. It should be below average, at least between 2,500 strings of coins and 5,000 strings of coins. Hearing this, Zhang Feng understood that these 3 old men still wanted to be on good terms with him. In other words, she wanted him to owe her a favor. He was a little repulsed because he hated owing people favors the most. He could return the money he owed, but it was not easy to return a favor. But now, other than the Yang Consortium, there were no other places that could afford it. Even if there were, they wouldn't dare to sell it. Looks like I'll definitely owe him a favor today. How am I going to repay him in the future? Chapter 2099. Zhang Feng's eyes widened as he subconsciously said, the Yang Consortium is really ruthless this time. Wang Shi nodded and returned the deed to Zhang Feng. You got a great bargain this time. The Yang family has also invested a lot. Zhang Feng couldn't help but smile bitterly. It was fine if he didn't get a bargain, but he still owed the Yang family a favor. It seemed like he had benefited, but in fact, the Yang family had benefited. He had to admit that these 3 old men were really smart. Seeing that he didn't want a free house, they forcibly lowered the price of a house by 2,000 strings of coins. How ruthless. However, this also showed that the conflict between the Yang family and the 7 families couldn't be resolved. He needed to break it himself. He said with a heavy expression, I owe the Yang family a favor this time. I don't know how to repay it next time. Wang Shi smiled faintly. Nephew, don't worry. That old man Yang Gang just wants to bet on you. As long as you can suppress the 7 families, not only will you not have to repay this favor, but there might also be a lot of benefits in the future. Zhang Feng nodded. These 3 leaders aren't simple people. Each one is more scheming than the other. They gave me these houses because they want to build a good relationship with me. Secondly, if I suppress the 7 families in the future, they can get some benefits from it. It's killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Wang Shi stroked his beard and smiled. Nephew, don't blame those 3 old men. They are also thinking about the development of the Yang family. After all, they have been suppressed by the 7 families for many years. They have long been cautious. Zhang Feng didn't understand, but he didn't like the way they forced favors. It felt like they were forcing people to buy. He smiled faintly. Uncle, don't worry. I understand. If they perform well in the future, it's not impossible to give them some benefits. Wang Shi nodded slightly and stroked his beard with satisfaction. He was still very satisfied with this nephew's performance. He was neither servile nor overbearing, just like a great master. He just didn't know how things would develop in the future. Just as he was thinking, the sound of a horse came from outside the window. The carriage had stopped. Zhang Feng helped Wang Shi down the carriage and cupped his hands. Uncle, I won't be going in. There are still many things to deal with at home. Wang Shi could understand. He clasped his hands behind his back and said, Go back and get busy. However, you must always be on guard against the people of the 7 families. Zhang Feng cupped his hands and said, Thank you for your reminder, uncle. I will remember it. With that, he turned around and returned to the carriage. The carriage set off once again, rushing towards the mansion. Zhang Feng touched the contract in his hand. He felt that the day had passed very quickly. First he met Uncle Wang. Uncle Wang treated him like a nephew, as if they were family. He even felt like he had returned to Chang'an. This was because Uncle Wang gave him the feeling of an old elementary scholar. He was like an old elementary scholar who cared about him. Later on, he went to the Yang clan. Although those 3 guys were a little scheming, they were still good people. It was just that they had a different stance from the 7 families. If there was a chance in the future, he would help them. Just as he was thinking, the carriage suddenly shook violently, just like when a carriage crashed in his previous life. Zhang Feng was shocked. Could it be that he had hit someone? He put his hand on the side of the carriage and hurriedly asked, Baoqing, what happened outside? Fengzi, there's a carriage in front of us. Yuqi Baoqing's voice came from outside. Hearing this, Zhang Feng's earlier excitement completely disappeared. He shouted, How the F***ck are you driving a carriage? As soon as he said that, the carriage stopped shaking. He hurriedly got out of the carriage and saw that there was another carriage in front of him. This carriage was made of high-quality wood and emitted a delicate fragrance. There were also many beaded curtains hanging on it. It was obvious that this was the carriage of a young lady from a wealthy family. His guess was right. In less than a moment, a female voice came from the carriage in front. How are you driving a carriage? Why is it shaking? As soon as the voice fell, a woman came out. She had a long bun with a jade hairpin on the top of her head. Her hair fell naturally on both sides. She wore a light blue gauze dress with gold thread and a pair of embroidered shoes. Together with her high nose bridge and small cherry lips, she looked like a fairy who had descended to the mortal world. At this moment, she also noticed Zhang Feng. She blushed and turned to look at the servant driving the carriage. Little Zhao, how are you driving? The servant called Little Zhao had a bitter expression and hurriedly cupped his hands. Miss, this wasn't done by me. It was the carriage opposite. As he spoke, he pointed at Yuqi Baoqing, indicating that this fellow was the one who did it. When the woman saw this, she put her hands on her hips and looked at Yuqi Baoqing angrily. You're the one who crashed into my carriage? Which family are you from? How dare you? Seeing this, Zhang Feng finally understood. The 2 carriages had collided. It seemed that it was his family's fault. He hurriedly cupped his hands and said to the woman, Miss, please forgive me. It's my fault for disciplining him. Seeing that someone had admitted defeat, the woman's arrogance seemed to have increased. She pouted. So it was you who did it. Tell me, how are you going to compensate me? As he spoke, he took out 3 deeds from his waist and placed them on the table. Hao Chujun stared blankly at him. Was this a F***king title deed? And there were 3 of them? He stood up abruptly and took a look at the deeds. His pupils shrank. This seemed to be a mid-tier area? He looked at Zhang Feng in disbelief. Master, where did you get these deeds? Why are they in such a good area? Everyone also noticed the abnormality and rushed over, not letting go of the deeds. Zhang Feng glanced at everyone and lightly said, All right, it's just a few deeds. It's not like they're in a good area. Hurry up and get someone to clean it up. I'm going to rest. With that, he stood up and walked to his room. Everyone was embarrassed. They wanted to ask about the deeds, but they realized that Fengzi wouldn't say anything. Thus, everyone shifted their gaze to Yuqi Baoqing. This guy went out with Fengzi, so he must know something. Hao Chujun stared at Yuqi Baoqing seriously and asked, Baoqing, how did you get these deeds? Yuqi Baoqing smiled awkwardly. I only know that Fengzi went to find an old man, then went to the Yang family and got them. I don't know anything else. Fine, it was a waste of time. Hao Chujun sighed. He knew that he wouldn't get anything useful out of this guy. He could only ask again. Then why is Master so angry? Hearing this, Yuqi Baoqing chuckled. Just now, we met a woman who bumped into our carriage. That woman was very fierce and wanted to hit Fengzi. If I wasn't there, Fengzi would have been hit. Then Fengzi went up and hit that woman. That woman lay on the carriage and cried. That's it. Hearing this, everyone's interest seemed to be piqued. They all knew Zhang Feng well, but they had never heard of this guy hitting someone, let alone a woman. That was a F***king rare thing. For a moment, everyone gathered together and started talking at once. Yuqi Baoqing seemed to enjoy this atmosphere and started talking with everyone. At the same time, a carriage was running wildly on the street. If Zhang Feng was here, he would definitely recognize that it was the carriage from just now. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.